music fans around the USA and across the pond. We welcome you on this chilly Sunday morning to IFP Stadium for Week 22 of the Indy 500 Podcast League. This is a show where each week Helio and Breddy break down a different randomly selected album from NME Magazine's Top 500 Albums of All Time list. Today's episode centers on Gram Parsons' final album, Grievous Angel. I'm Al Michaels, subbing in for the boys, as they prepare to face off in a rematch of Week 20's fan-favorite cold open segment, where they assign each NFL team a band or artist who matches that team's vibe. A great kickoff for a great episode. And we are almost underway. So now we'll send you down to the field, where Helio and Breddy are waiting to make their picks. Helio, take it away.
All right. Well, thanks for that wonderful intro, Al. We know you have duties, so we'll let you get back to it. But yeah, you might wonder why we're doing an NFL segment at the top of the show, but we've got a little Parsons package we're doing this week, a little cross promotion with the start of the NFL season. Micah Parsons, Gram Parsons, the NFL, all that good stuff. So if you go to NFL.com, type in Parsons 500 at checkout on NFL.com, you'll get an error saying coupon not found, offer not valid on planet Earth, and non-redeemable for Alan Parsons merch, if such a thing does exist. But now with the corporate sponsor out of the way, let's get to it. Breddy, we are here again, as Al told us, to comp NFL teams to bands or artists. So do you want to take us away? Who you got this week?
I was muted that whole time. The division I pulled was the AFC West. The four teams for the AFC West are the Denver Broncos, Kansas City Chiefs, Las Vegas Raiders, and LA Chargers. The LA Chargers have already upended the narrative I've written and out for them here, so bear with me. We planned on recording before the actual season started, but yeah, of course, got delayed.
It's an 18-week season. They still have time to set it right.
Yeah, exactly. I don't. Week. What does week one really mean here?
Yeah.
Anyways, the first team I wanted to run down was the Broncos. So the Denver Broncos' modern history is one of basically horror after horror. After winning a Super Bowl in 2015, they've suffered a kind of listless run of seasons afterwards, culminating in an all-time, all-sports bad trade for Seattle quarterback Russell Wilson, and pairing him with a head coach who may or may not have actually just been a front for Aaron Rodgers the whole time. But as is for a lot of teams coming into a new season, a new day has dawned after hitting a major reset and hiring Sean Payton as their coach, cutting ties with Danger Russ Wilson. The Broncos have now afforded themselves a chance to rebuild into something worth watching. And it seems that they have. They have been kind of the talk of the offseason. Their rookie QB, Bo Nix, has exceeded expectations last year. And they might just have the best defense in the NFL. And they're now a trendy pick to see the kind of like late playoffs now. And as much as I hate to say it, this story arc here reminds me of a favorite band of both of ours, the Mars Volta. Similarly, last seen putting out a string of kind of listless releases and making a terrible trade, sending singer Cedric Bixler-Zavala into the arms of Scientology. The Mars Volta have also smashed that reset button, sending Scientology packing and putting out a comeback album was kind of like much better than expected. And they now have...
Was it Omar that got traded to Scientology or Cedric?
I'm almost sure it was Cedric.
Okay.
As a mini expert who has seen the documentary that I think may be actually out now, I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's no longer just at film festivals.
No, yeah, I think we mentioned that that scheme on one of the earlier episodes. But I did dupe that movie's distributor into sending me a preview copy through a wacky scheme. One of the best things I've done in my life.
It's pretty good.
All right, what division did you have there?
Yeah, I know. So I went for an interesting one. I feel like the AFC South. So the teams in that one are Houston Texans Indianapolis Colts, Jacksonville Jaguars, and the Tennessee Titans. So I'll kick things off with Houston there. And for me, they kind of reminded me of Vitalogy era Pearl Jam. I look at it as Houston with an insanely good rookie season, or a first album, if you will, from CJ Stroud, and then kind of not bad, and historically pretty good. But the second season from Stroud, kind of a letdown. I would say Versus, while it's one of Pearl Jam's better albums, it didn't live up to like 10. I mean, what was going to, honestly. But at the end of the day, Houston made a fair bit of changes, and they're looking to come back and push Stroud forward. As Pearl Jam on Vitalogy kind of went a little forward, went some different directions. A little bit more weirder at times, a little bit more rocking on some, a little slower on others. So it really kind of mixed it up and pushed things forward a bit, and really found a whole new level of artistic success.
Vitalogy era Pearl Jam. And that does kind of match the general opinion. A lot of these AFC teams, because they're not in the, they're not even on the Seahawks half of the NFL. We kind of have like vague, vague feelings about them. But yeah, that matches the kind of vague feelings I get from, whatever national rundowns I usually hear. Like
Stroud should have been the MVP, this time last year, if you ask anybody, and then it was kind of like, oh wait, he has nobody blocking for him.
Everybody's kind of like, there may be a slump, but it's still kind of a, it's still they're one of the teams above that line where you're like, well, this is
still a playoff situation.
This is a good situation.
Right. But they could have, we expect a little more. Yeah.
Yeah. The next team I threw down was the Las Vegas Raiders. The Raiders are kind of an odd duck heading into 2025. They are now 5 years removed from transplanting their team out of California and into Las Vegas. They seem willing to try anything to find success after last year having a kind of dour 4-13 season. The most bold move they made this offseason was yoinking the former coach and quarterback from Seattle. That'd be Geno Smith, quarterback, and Pete Carroll as a coach. And they're now tasking them with proving that, they aren't just a cover band of a bygone era. And lest anything with the Raiders be normal, their home field is one of the newer ones, a very modern venue. And it's also unique in that the stadium, because of where it's located, will almost always have more opposing team fans than home fans whenever they play. So they're almost a little bit of a team without a team without a home. But coincidentally, just a stone's throw away from that stadium, Allegiant Stadium, you'll often find another fellow Californian outfit trying to make it work, with a couple of Pete Carroll aged dudes, mining former glory for a few more years. And they are also in a unique venue, sometimes known as the Sphere. But rather than black and gray, you're more likely to find them surrounded by tie-dye and rainbows. Can you guess done. Who I'm talking about here?
You're talking about the cast of The Wizard of Oz.
There you go. It's correct. The band I've chosen is the Sphere presentation of the Wiz. No, it's the Dead and Company.
Nice. Yeah.
It's kind of a similar story. Yes. I think it's safe to say that, DNC are finding more success than the Raiders so far in their Las Vegas outings. I wrote down here that in this scenario, Bob Weir is Max Crosby, a steady presence who will never disappoint no matter what the team around him looks like. And then I wrote down that John Mayer then would be Geno Smith, a new face who probably never imagined he'd be where he is. Getting all
I'd even go as far as to say is he might be the Ashton Gianti of the group. 30 years younger than everybody else in the locker room, and still bringing it.
That may be more apt. But for Gino, I was going to say he's kind of in a second career, right? The same way that John Mayer is. That he might not have expected after his first effort out. Playing with both him and Gino are kind of playing with house money. If I'm allowed to make one more Vegas reference there.
Yeah, you brought up an interesting thing, the idea of a late era Seahawks carol cover band that'd be like covering, 1980s doo-wop Billy Joel or something like that, and just ignoring the entire like run of hits in the 70s. Like, why are you covering this? This isn't even the best stuff.
Yeah. And Pete's gonna run the offense he always runs and the style he always runs, but I'm sure nobody there was not expecting that to happen. So,
right.
We get to see today, I believe, how it pans out.
Exactly. Yeah.
Football is back.
Just a short while from now.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So I had next up the Indianapolis Colts. And for me, the vibe reminded me of, this is kind of a deep cut here, Slash's Snake Pit. For those who maybe haven't heard it or don't remember it, it was a post Guns N' Roses project of Slash, surprisingly enough by the name. Mid 90s, kind of that point where Axl was stuck in writer's block, trying to write the perfect album, and Slash still wanted to do stuff, a little bit removed from the heyday. So when I look at a team like the Colts, they still have Jonathan Taylor there, who's great, productive, and, really one of the best of the last decade at what he does. But who the hell is around him and why? This week they're starting Daniel Jones. I mean, seriously?
Danny Dimes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. And, before that, it was between him and Anthony Richardson. Like, really, Jonathan Taylor can't get a better supporting cast than that? It's kind of sad. And I would say the album's overall disappointing. They're not Guns N' Roses. What is?
The vibes are not immaculate here.
Right. And, for the Colts, they're not going to be Manning era. They're not even going to be like dominant Jonathan Taylor era 5-6 years ago, but Taylor's still there. So how bad could it really be to watch him? At least he's going to be effective, just like Slash was still laying down Slash solos, but the rest of it, take it or leave it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And in the same way, and in the same way that Jonathan Taylor may push you into a win on his own every once in a while. Like Slash is kind of a progress stopper there too. Like he's good enough that
you might walk away with a cool riff or a cool song.
Yeah, he's not. He may not need to go find better people, but maybe he should.
Right, he deserves better. Yeah,
there you go. So here's a big name in my division, the Kansas City Chiefs, who are a modern dynasty. If one exists, it's them. They've won 3 Super Bowls since 2020, and I think the obvious answer here. The one that everybody wants to hear. Correct, right?
Genesis.
Correct.
Yes.
Taylor Swift, actually. Taylor Swift is the obvious here. Another artist who's sitting atop her chosen field, and she's also regularly seen at actual Chiefs games. Now supporting her now fiance, tight end Travis Kelce, who I believe had a decent game yesterday. Not a win, but I saw him in a few highlights. Anyways, but that's not what I'm doing, folks. I am not here to take the easy route. No pain, no gain, no days off.
If we wanted to go the easy route, we wouldn't be doing this show.
So the other, one other candidate, not my final choice, but one other candidate that came to mind was the Smashing Pumpkins, who are a band who are often accused of letting down their genius leader in a situation that mirrors what many people believe to be the Chiefs being a drag on their greatest of all time quarterback, perhaps greatest of all time. But in the end, I chose a band that reminded me more of the Chiefs because of their current situations kind of revolving around Public Opinion. And that would be the Swedish rockers / metal band Ghost.
Oh, interesting.
So both Ghost and the Chiefs have scored a string of big successes very recently. And before that, they were making themselves beloved by real hardcore rock and metal fans, they were reviving the kind of Blue Oyster Cult style, which everybody, there was a while there where everybody thought that was cool and that was great.
I've actually got a signed poster that I got when I met them at Silver Platters in Seattle.
Ooh,
I want to say
nice.
9 years back, pre it being too cool to like them, but still kind of on the up and up.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you're meeting them at Silver Platters as opposed to paying $5,000 to get like 5 minutes, then you caught them early there.
Yeah.
But after having that success for perhaps longer than many people expected, they're now drawing the ire and hatred of the very fans who used to, cheer them on. And now both Ghost and the Chiefs are coming into a season where they're back to slugging it out with the A tier as opposed to being, alone in a whole other tier. But the Ghost's last album hit number 1, and I've heard different NFL shows and stuff say, these things don't matter. The Chiefs are still going to go to the Super Bowl and likely be favorites to win. So,
yeah.
Whatever. The Ghost had the number 1, and now it's your move, Chiefs. Let's see.
Well, I would say that's an interesting comp too, is because the leader of Ghost, Tobias Forge, is the only consistent member, like album to album and tour to tour. So, like, no matter who they swap in, they're hitting number 1, just basically trading off the one guy alone. Kind of like Mahomes and Kelsey, like whoever else is there, great, come along for the ride. We're going to go to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, they've had some, they've had a rotating door for wide receivers at least, and I believe running backs. So, an unintended little synergy there.
Yeah, every running back or receiver is going to be, absolute Pro Bowler until they get behind a car or, do anything else stupid and just, I guess next guy up. Let's just keep it going.
Speaking of next guy up.
Next guy up. All right. So I pulled the Jacksonville Jaguars. And for me, they kind of reminded me of, and caveat, I went very era specific for some of these. 1968 to 1969 Pink Floyd. I pulled for them. So this is when Syd Barrett was still in the band and David Gilmour was starting to come in. I feel like Syd, he definitely led them, to the top of this UK psychedelic scene, much like Coach Doug Peterson has led, the Eagles to a Super Bowl victory. I should say former coach Doug Peterson. But, Syd obviously was ousted before they reached their greatest heights. We don't have to run down the whole thing, but Dark Side, Wall, Wish You Were Here, anything of that nature, he wasn't a part of. He might have inspired it, because of his story, but he wasn't a part of it. That was Gilmour. So, at this time, when Syd's out, Gilmour, Waters, Mason, and Wright got going. That was really when all the transcendent music was made. So at this point, they have a lot of pieces like Travis Hunter, Trevor Lawrence, and then they bring in coach, supposed to be a prodigy, Liam Cohen. They're really hoping can kind of push them to the next level, take these pieces and really just, get them like playoffs, Super Bowl. Trevor Lawrence is kind of like the promised one. Travis Hunter, two-way Heisman player, like first guy really since Dion with that kind of, acclaim going on. So the pieces are there. It's really just up to like who's going to push the songwriting or the playbook forward and make it happen for them.
Yeah, Trevor Lawrence is kind of the I could see him fitting into this. I could see him fitting into this mold where, you know, there's this first, you know, he definitely didn't have a Mahomes-ish out the gate, you know, kind of career, but I could still see him being somebody who, you know, something clicks around now or next year, and then, you know, he becomes the guy. So
totally. Yeah. I mean, it's not uncommon to see, you know, these quarterbacks take 4 or 5 years and all of a sudden it's, you know, approaching the second contract. Like, oh, now you're kicking total ass. Sorry about those first couple of years, guys.
Yeah. My final team in my division, who played last night, I believe, the Chargers. So the Chargers are they're revived under new leadership regime led by Jim Harbaugh. Last year they made it to the wild card round, losing to the Texans. Their quarterback, Justin Herbert, may finally be sort of living up to his prophesied potential. You know, as we just said, he's one of the kind of late bloomer class of quarterbacks who just keeps getting better and better. And despite the playoff exit, you know, they're kind of they've got a growth profile and they're laying down a foundation for a good future. Jim Harbaugh's arrival has kind of brought a new kind of discipline, toughness, and renewed identity. But unfortunately, that identity is one where they are known for late game collapses, basically. A phenomenon known as either chargering, or when people say the Chargers are going to charger. So basically the personality I've assigned to both them and the artist is one of, you know, I guess it's, can you overcome this nature of ruining things? And Chargers, I'm very sorry to do this, but I hereby dub the official team of Kanye West.
Ooh, yeah.
Who for a while there seemed like maybe, you know, he was making music good enough and keeping a low enough profile that he may once again succeed despite himself, you know, putting out albums like Yeezus and Life of Pablo that everybody was, you know, pretty big on, before pulling a charging of his own and wiping out in epic fashion at the last moment. It's now all for naught. So both the Chargers and Kanye need to demonstrate that they are capable of normal, stable behavior over a very, very long timeline if either one of them is going to shake this reputation. And right now, I think for Kanye, the money is still safe on Kanye's gonna Kanye. Chargers, after at least winning their debut over the Chiefs as well. So that's nothing to shake a stick at. You know, they weren't kicking the Raiders while they were down or something like that. You know, they overcame
in Brazil, no less.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Interesting. So, you know, they may be on the right track. Kanye, I mean, I guess considering he was at rock bottom 0 and has now been quiet for a couple of months, I suppose that is a step in the right direction as well. But, you know, for both
as we see, though, yeah, it can be a dangerous slope, you know.
Yeah,
Kanye,
for both of you, we shall
one
see.
Incident. Yeah, Kanye, one incident.
And of course, Chargers, you know, you're one game away from, you know, losing it in the last 2 minutes to who knows what.
Exactly. Any terrible loss can kill the morale. Oh God. Yeah. No, that's going to be a fun one to follow, though. That's an interesting idea. Yeah. I find the Chargers slightly less offensive, but slightly.
Yeah. Slightly.
Not entirely, but slightly.
Yeah. They have reasons to be. They have reasons to look ahead now.
There's still some anti-Semitic football at play there, I'm sure.
That's a hard one to riff on. Maybe we can. Well, I mean, they were playing against Harrison Butker.
Oh, he was definitely wide right, wasn't he?
Yes. Yeah. Interestingly, that, I mean, for calls of the season, it's way too early to say, but I can't imagine anything is going to top I forget who it was who
I think it was
said
Rich Eisen.
Okay, we'll say it's Rich Eisen calling a Harrison Butker field goal and saying, interestingly, he's gone wide right.
Yes.
Yeah.
I forgot he was still playing.
Yeah. Go ahead and Google Harrison Butker and I don't know, maybe MAGA or something like that if you want to find out more.
Yeah. Don't spend too much time on it though.
Good job, Rich Eisen. Yeah.
It'll kill your brain cells.
Yeah. Speaking of which, maybe we should move out of
move
out of the NFL before
onto a team hoping they have.
Yeah, we also get head injuries here.
Yeah, exactly. Onto a team hoping we have maybe a couple brain cells this year. Last year's worst team and first overall picking team, the Tennessee Titans. So with them, I went with post David Lee Roth Van Halen. I feel like the Titans have not found the same level of success since Steve McNair led them to the Super Bowl, some 25 years back.
Jesus Christ.
Which is really, kind of a, God, we're old. I remember watching that game and it was one of the best I've ever seen. But, over time, they've brought in the pedigree quarterbacks, the high draft pick, the free agents. They've had guys like Vince Young reminds me of, when Van Halen brought in Sammy Hagar, and then they got Ryan Tannehill, just like getting the singer from Extreme to come sing for him. All these guys walked through the door. They had their ups and downs. They had moments. And, I think we can debate a lot on the Sammy Hagar Van Halen era. It just wasn't the same, at the end of the day. I love most of it, but it wasn't original David Lee Roth Van Halen. But the staying force through all of it for the Titans is Derrick Henry. So now I'm looking at Van Halen as like, well, they had Van Halen, it's pretty good. So now they're kind of left with nothing. They left with really no pieces from the glory era. They're looking to start over again, with Cam Ward, number 1 pick. Another singer hoping they can come in just like, Michael Anthony's out there touring with who knows, with Satriani and Old Man Hagar and trying to make it work. And, some of the glory can still be had out there, some of the memories, but for that franchise in general, it's kind of bleak. Yeah. It's a distant memory. You might have to have a DVD player or a VHS player to really watch the good stuff. So hey, can Cam Ward, take him back to the glory days? I don't know. I mean, he did spend a season as a Washington State Cougar, so it's kind of a scary omen. Reminds me a little bit of Ryan Leaf there. Will they make future plans and dream about it yesterday, or hey, come on, turn this thing around right now?
Or will they end the season with their fans saying, "I might as well jump"?
Might very well. Yeah.
Fun item there on the one NFL podcast I really listen to a lot is called Heed the Call, and their producer actually runs one of the more prominent Tennessee Titans podcasts, and he's been trying to get a nickname going for Cam Ward fans, the Psych Ward.
That's awesome.
And I hear there's t-shirts and I'm like, I might look into this.
That's not bad. I could support a guy with that kind of name. Yeah. And then just for the football, for the record, Derrick Henry is on the Ravens. Eddie Van Halen, dearly departed, miss him every day, but Derrick Henry's still alive and kicking and running over fools.
Yep. It's very strange to see him on a different team because that did always feel like the one thing for the Titans. The Titans could always look at and be like, well, we have
Marcus Mariota, we have Ryan Tannehill, but we have Derrick Henry.
Yeah. Well, and on that note, we will head into the tunnel at the end of this show's first quarter with the score NFL 7, Indy's 500. Helio, hit that theme. This next one's a song we haven't played in a while. It's a song about a podcast and the audience who loves it. All right, let's go. I don't want to be your weekend lover, but maybe I could be flying Burrito brother. It's a podcast. You're gonna love it. It's the Indy 500. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, this week's episode, number 22, is centered on Mr. Gram Parsons' final album, as Al Michaels informed us. It is number 317 on the NME Top 500 Albums of All Times list, and it was released in January of 1974. This is, I believe, the second album in a row now that we don't have an exact release date on.
Yeah,
they must have had better things to do in the 70s than write down when your album actually came out.
Yeah, I suppose.
Yeah, but a quick pre-statement before we get into the artist history and the artist himself. The story of Gram Parsons' life and death does involve a lot of drug use and abuse. So we wanted to drop a little pre-statement ahead here. So over the life of this podcast, with the subject matter that we have, there's going to be a number of lessons that emerge from the stories we kind of discover in all of these albums. And sadly, one that I know that we're going to hear more often than we want to is that drugs ruin lives, if not outright end them. And, while there's definitely different levels of danger with different kinds of drugs and people's tolerances and really their luck, varying from person to person, there is definitely a class of drugs that includes some that were Graham's chosen, like heroin and morphine and cocaine, that can destroy a life in very, very short order. So listeners, kids, hear me and Helio out when we say, don't do drugs. And if you really must do drugs, at least try to be smart about it. Know thyself, know your risks, know if it's worth it, and always err on the side of caution. Let a story like Gram Parsons be a cautionary lesson for your own life. And if you're currently in the struggle or know somebody who is, know that there's help, there's resources. And even if it's not somebody who's in your life right now, there's services who can connect you with support and people, who have been there and really do know what you're going through. The one that we wrote down here is the National Rehab Hotline, which is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So if you have heard this message and it resonated with you, you can call it right now. The number for that line is 866-210-1303. One more time, 866-210-1303 for immediate help with substance use or mental health crises. And with that out of the way, I am very, very excited to start talking about this week's artist, Mr. Gram Parsons.
Yes, Mr. Gram Parsons. It was kind of a name. I don't know about you, your familiarity before we started this week. It's kind of felt like a name where I had seen it throughout the history pages, so to speak, but I didn't know a lot about. You could have told me 300 things that were all false, and I would have said, oh, okay, sure, that's cool, right on. But no, a really interesting character and a lot of cross-section of music from the times that he was around that Like,
yeah,
oh
I was
wow,
going
he
to
was.
say, I feel like previous to this, my familiarity would probably be like, oh, that's one of those names from, the old band that David Crosby was in,
Right.
along with the Byrds, basically.
Totally. Yeah. So no, I mean, a really interesting story. All the context around the album and just kind of his influence on music in general. Super cool.
Yeah, I've got some notes for this one for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, let's kind of dig into it. So Gram Parsons was born November 5th, 1946 in Winter Haven, Florida. He was actually born Cecil Connor III before he was dubbed the king and creator of country rock, or cosmic rock, as some folks might call it. As we talked about, addiction plays a role in his story. Even from early on, his parents were both alcoholics. His dad self-medicating from the PTSD he suffered, as a time serving in World War II. And his mom, the same. She wasn't in World War II, but still had the alcoholic issues going on. And then,
his mother Avis was also very, very well to do, as an heiress to one of the most prominent citrus fruit operations in all of Florida. So most of the time, the Florida citrus business is kind of hit and miss, depending on the growing seasons and whether. But during World War II, her father amassed a very, very large fortune because the American armed forces were leaning on his farms to produce as many canned oranges as they could possibly make throughout the war. And they were paying over market price the entire time for them. So post World War II, Gram Parsons' family, or at least his mother, is sitting atop a very large fortune, which does come into play later.
Yeah, I mean, aren't you glad they didn't grow bananas?
Yeah, for him.
As a kid, Gram was like any other kid of the era, kind of that 50s Leave It to Beaver scene. Loved Boy Scouts, which his dad ran the troop, hunting, fishing, football. But when he was 10 years old, he stayed out late on a school night to go see some guy, Elvis Presley. I don't know if anybody's heard of him. It's kind of a new one to me. Yeah, from then on, music was his mission, really. I mean, that was like he found his calling at that age. What he appreciated about Elvis was that he brought together country, blues, rock and roll, and it was just this complete package. And that's not a Elvis shaking his hips joke. That's a indictment of Elvis's music. So Gram spent the next few years learning, lip syncing, performing Elvis songs on his patio. Kind of just the showman early on. Whether it was the neighborhood kids, his family, he just kind of loved singing and dancing and entertaining.
Yeah, and he would often have like his sisters filling in as his pretend backup band. And there's a documentary where a lot of our info comes from called Fallen Angel, that has interviews with a lot of primary sources. And one of his sisters said that he would that they would always just be out there having fun, but he would often like kind of chastise them if they were not taking the Elvis impression as seriously as he did as his backing band.
Totally understandable.
Yes.
Yeah. He's on the path, man.
Yeah. He's as is often when you're a little more serious than the people around you, you're like, come on.
Yeah. Come on, man. I'm working hard. 1958, tragedy kind of entered Gram's life when his dad had committed suicide. The family was out of town to celebrate Christmas, and his dad was supposed to come out and join them, but never did. They got back home after a couple days and found him, and really, there's no jokes to be made there. Just really sad. Gram's mom did remarry a man named Robert Parsons. The family then adopted his last name, but at the same time, his mother's alcohol abuse worsened. And, between his dad's passing, his mom's alcoholism, just being a teenager, Gram was feeling pretty alone. But at 15, he found an outlet. He learned guitar, started writing lyrics, and joined a school cover band called The Legends that covered Ray Charles, Chuck Berry, Little Richard. But, it also came at the cost of his education. And sometimes as a cliche story, he spent so much time, in music that he flunked out of high school.
Yeah, we're what, like maybe 6% into the list, and I believe we've heard this right. Too serious about music, dropped out of school story a few times now. Right,
exactly. But I think what's interesting though is, he did turn it around. He was such a smart dude. He got back on track. He enrolled at a prep school in Jacksonville, a little bit away from home. He was still all about the music and everything, but he did buckle down. And he was able to graduate there, finish school. But yeah, during school breaks, he had a gig playing with a folk cover band called the Shilohs. And then, man, this guy can't catch a break sometimes. On the day of his high school graduation, he found out his mom had died from alcohol complications. So, wah, wah, again.
Yeah, and it kind of, there's always an aspect to, people who have, a lot of times people who have addiction stories, it kind of originates in, having trauma and tragedy, in their early life, like Gram did a few times here, obviously. So, it's something that he shares with, with the, a lot of the people who have this, this kind of, compulsion or addictive part to their lives. It's not just that, they picked up drugs and they thought they were so fun and so great that they just couldn't, it's usually you're trying to cover something or escape from something.
Yeah. It's often said, that like in AA, for instance, the bottle is not the problem. It's the solution,
Mm-hmm.
So what is it internally? And yeah, usually, again, we'll caveat and say we're far from experts on the matter, but, we do have experiences in our lives around it, but it's just kind of one of those, you try to fix that hole with whatever. And, for Gram, it wasn't as much alcohol as it was drugs, it became easy for him. And, when his mom passed, he actually was given an annual income of $30,000 from a trust fund established by his mom, which, sure, it doesn't sound like a lot today, but in the early 60s,
back in the 70s, 60s, 70s, that's kick up your heels money.
Yeah, you can kind of do whatever at that point. Gave him the freedom to really just pursue music, and didn't have to work, could have fun, but even if that meant doing drugs and just jamming. So he did it. What was cool, I thought, we talked about, it's drop out of school, go do music, happily ever after. He actually got into Harvard. Despite everything going on, this is a kid that's still buckled down, made it to an Ivy League school. When he was there, he formed a group called The Like, which eventually became the International Submarine Band. And then, I think you had made note here, often credited as the first ever country rock band.
Yeah, it's a few different sources did, whenever the International Submarine Band would pop up, a few different sources did kind of point them out as at least one of the most early, conscious attempts to fuse country and rock together.
Yeah, and it's, we'll talk about it throughout the episode, but it's such an interesting idea to think of that really not existing prior, because, rock was newer, but country, was so part of the fabric of, American music for so long. It's just kind of like, that was a struggle when we first picked this up. And I kept seeing people talk about, a big aspect of this album, and basically every album from Gram's time in the Byrds and afterwards is, he's trying to put together country and rock. And then I would go and I would listen to these albums and I'm like, well, this just sounds like really good country to me. Right.
But it's one of those things where, like, okay, well, after this point, like, it was a thing, and it was a thing since before we were born, really. And, we live in a world where country and rock, at least for a good while there, probably between Graham's time and maybe like the late 80s, like this is what country was, really.
Right. And I mean, we came of age in an era when Wilco and things were already established. So now we're trying to go back in time and like, really
and
notice doing this.
That was almost like a second or third wave of country rock, really.
Right.
What we call alt rock now. And, a lot of people call Graham the godfather of alt rock. I think it needs to go back further than that. He's almost like the primordial fish that crawled out of the ocean of
he's the Big Bang and the single cell organism.
Yeah, correct. Exactly.
But yeah, during this time at Harvard, still playing music, according to friends and bandmates, Graham was his own biggest fan and self-promoter. I mean, he loved what he did. He loved to kind of brag when he had his moments. They got a contract with RCA to do some demos, and he'd go around telling people how much money RCA gave him, or that he'd make up little stories about him and Paul McCartney were co-writing songs, and he was best friends with George Harrison, or Ed Sullivan was on the phone, trying to book him for his show. He loves spinning a little bit of a mythos about himself, and I probably kind of paid off a little bit, just kind of getting that buzz going. I mean, college campus, start some rumors. Hey, there's that Gram Parsons kid. Isn't he going to be on Ed Sullivan show? Oh my God, that's amazing.
Yeah, I'll always remember. I had some little book that was like how to break into Hollywood, and one of the things that they would say is like call into studios or like the script reading departments and being like, do you have a copy of this? Or, have you guys, are you guys making a bid on this? And, you're talking about your own script. I always thought that was very silly, but then again, like it can't hurt.
It only takes one or two people to buy what you're selling, for all of a sudden to get a push.
If one person takes that seriously, then you've done a great service to your career. So,
exactly. Yeah.
Get creative out there, people,
a very fun
for promotion,
very fun self-promoter on it. And at this time too, he's really started exploring and getting into country music, gospel, kind of the Americana type stuff with a friend, and later somebody really credited as a mentor, and that's the Reverend James Jett Thomas. Country at the time was almost kind of the conformist haircut music, not the alternative, outlet we can think of at times, with the hippies, and kind of folk music running things on the charts and in counterculture. Yeah, country is kind of like for uptight squares and prudes and rednecks. The more I researched it, the more it seemed that Graham's true his real the experimental thing that he was really doing at the time was basically just making it that he was the one playing. he was the one playing this music. He's definitely doing fusions and, kind of figuring out how much country you can fit into rock, how much rock you can fit into country. But the big thing that people were looking at and being like, well, this is something different, is the fact that this kind of hippie-ish rocker guy was actually even doing country. And then, right. The music itself can be good, but it's just kind of who's the person playing it.
Yeah. That was the big like thing that people were looking at. Like, well, this is odd. Even if he was, even if a lot of the time he was not playing, insanely different sounding country. A lot of the times he's just doing, standards, and he's trying to do the thing. But it's these hippies doing. But for a little more context on what country kind of meant before now, I had a quote from a later collaborator, Emmylou Harris, who said, she recalls, quote, I would say until I had met Gram and started working with him, I didn't really understand or have a real love or feel for country music. Like most of my generation, country music was politically incorrect for us at that point. It was associated with Republicans and the right wing and that sort of thing. So it really is him, grabbing it and trying to make it not just one section of America's thing. Like he wanted it to be everybody's.
Which, that's a noble thought, actually. Why hit on the music? You can put different ideas on the music. It doesn't have to be the same old.
And that still is kind of the staple of, at least to me, that's still kind of the staple feature of alt country. No matter how traditionally you sound, like sometimes who you are or what you're saying just does not match, totally. the traditional old style of what country's about. And I don't know, I find that cool and fun.
Yeah. I mean, just because you're from Georgia doesn't mean you have to have one viewpoint in your music or your life. You can kind of apply it differently. And I mean, Gram from Florida, same idea. Like, you don't have to be Florida, man.
Yeah.
So Gram and his band were working with these new influences and, really fusing them into their sound as they're playing shows, recording demos. At this point, it was clear to him that he was pretty much well on the path to being a professional musician. So he had the chance to talk with Harvard administrators to allow him to take leave. He wasn't outright done with the school. There was always going to be a spot for him. But, they said, go do it. Go pursue that dream. Nothing wrong with Harvard having some professional musicians, in its midst. And if you want to come back, we'll be happy to have you. So Gram at the time and the band moved out to LA to be more connected to the scene.
I'm sure all of this has nothing to do with his family's gigantic fortune waiting in the wings. I'm sure anybody who tells Harvard, hey, I'm gonna F off for a while and do country music. I'm sure every single person who does that probably gets a warm note back from them saying, yes, go ahead. And anytime you want to come back, feel free.
Yeah. Fly into the Parsons International Airport here at Harvard when you're getting ready to come back.
Yes.
Yeah. They moved out to LA. They had kind of transitioned from folk to what they described as more of a country rhythm and blues. Which is what Gram did become known for, that country rock sound. The general consensus from the time was that there were folks here and there that did enjoy the music. They had people in their audiences at the shows. They had, some loyal fans, but it wasn't really bridging the worlds together like Gram had hoped yet. A quote from Gram is, "I don't know if I'm playing with fire or if I'm doing the right thing even. I think I am. When I say that long hairs, short hairs, people with overalls, people with their velvet gear on can all be at the same place at the same time for the same reason. That turns me on." So again, kind of that hippie ideal of like, let's bring people together through song, but my songs are country tinged.
Yeah, he was kind of fighting he had his own front in the hippie war for acceptance and
absolutely
and love. Yeah, this was his corner that he was going to do it in.
Letting his freak flag fly that he loved honky Republican music, While in LA, he met Chris Hillman, one of the founders of the Byrds. And chances are, if you listen to this show, you know who the Byrds are, but maybe not. If you haven't heard them, To Everything, Turn. Yeah.
Yep, that's the Byrds.
Exactly. When the group was looking,
you may also recognize them from their cover of Mr. Tambourine Man by Dylan.
Another great one. The group at the time was looking for a new keyboard player, but they had Gram come by just to, see what he was all about. And then, they loved his songs so much that they had him join the band, playing rhythm guitar and helping to write. And it looks like at that time, Hillman and frontman Jim McGuinn had recently become a duo after the departure of these guys like David Crosby, Gene Clark, Michael Clark. Ooh. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, kind of did a little bit of
they were kind of depleted for members, and they were like,
yeah, but they still had the name to trade on. So why would they quit? Yeah.
They still needed somebody to play Turn at shows.
Right. Exactly. probably had a record deal to fulfill. So, let's put it together. At the time, Hillman was already kind of looking as well to bring that country sound into the band. He had performed bluegrass bands in the past before the Byrds, and it was really like the partnership between him and Gram Parsons that went on to override like Jim McGuinn's objections to becoming a country rock band. Like, it wasn't total buy-in across the board, but kind of the popular vote won out. Yeah, so the group released the album
when it's 1-to-1, and then a new member comes in who his entire life obsession is country rock. Like, it's kind of hard to.
The scales are a little
hard to get your way. Yeah,
exactly. So they had released the album "The Sweetheart of the Rodeo," which was not an album that was commercially successful, but really one of the first country rock records that would go on to inspire many artists. And there's a lot of callbacks on this, and
that one's actually on the enemy list. So we will be talking about the Byrds on that album specifically at some point later on.
Yeah, and
perhaps years and years from now, but at some point.
Hey, it's there. Hey, maybe we'll even call an audible and play it next week. Who knows?
Oh yeah, who knows? I mean, it can happen at any time, really.
Exactly.
And actually, while recording that album, "Sweetheart of the Rodeo," they were doing that in Nashville, and at the time they actually had a couple of notable clashes with the locals. The first one was they played at the Grand Ole Opry as the first quote unquote hippies to perform there. And they were not welcome. They were heckled and booed through the entire show.
Yeah.
And then also they had scored a interview with the local DJ named Ralph Emery, who proceeded to basically ambush them, make fun of them, and then trash the single that they were brought in to promote.
Wow.
Yeah. They did later get a little bit of revenge. I believe they wrote a song, I think it was called Truck Driving Man, about him and the
nice.
So yeah, the way that artists often get their revenge.
That's awesome. Let's see. But yeah, this is a pretty short-lived relationship. After transitioning kind of from hired gun to full member of the Byrds, Gram kind of starts a power struggle with Jim McGuinn, demanding the band hire a permanent pedal steel guitarist, and he wanted a bigger salary, and he wanted the next album to be credited to Gram Parsons and the Byrds. Like we said, he's not afraid to promote himself and to kind of, make it about him a little bit there. But these are moves which, really not just annoyed Jim, but the rest of the band. Who's this guy coming in and, we've already had our success and you're trying to tell us it's Gram Parsons and us clowns now. Mm-hmm. But yeah, at this point, they re-recorded or took out many of his vocal parts on the album, when Gram became distracted by legal trouble from a previous recording contract. Yeah,
he basically kind of got tied up at the time, and they turned around and said, we're lessening your influence on, and name on this album after what you've done.
Right. Yeah. Charming, really.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, Gram finally left the band. And it's kind of a multitude of stories here to, pick your flavor of which one you want to believe. His camp claims that it was whether or not to play a show in South Africa, because Gram wanted to protest apartheid and didn't believe that South Africa should, be honored with their loveliness. If they're going to support something like that. Chris Hillman's story was that Gram just wanted to hang out in the UK with his friends Keith Richards and the Stones and get high all day, which, doesn't sound bad. But, by 1969, Gram had become a permanent fixture in the Rolling Stones entourage and, really just part of the gang. And then kind of the mystery door option C is that Gram had developed a fear of flying and was trying to avoid shows that actually, he had to fly for. So obviously from anywhere else, getting down to South Africa, that's not exactly a hop, skip, and a jog. So
no,
why would you want to do that?
That's a true flight.
Yeah, exactly.
Another note that comes into play later, when Gram did leave the Byrds, he was replaced with another, a fellow pioneer of country rock, he was an extremely talented bluegrass guitarist named Clarence White. And actually, Clarence White's tenure with the Byrds as a guitarist is like very, very highly regarded. And he was sometimes, at the time, even compared to Jimi Hendrix. A couple of fun facts about Clarence White. He would later go on to invent the B-bender tremolo system for guitars, which allows a guitarist to bend the notes of the B string and kind of replicate the sound of a steel pedal guitar. But instead of doing it with like your hand, he kept it hands-free by making it attached to a series of pulleys inside the guitar that attaches to the strap. So you can just kind of like pull down on the whole guitar as you're playing to get that
That was super cool.
Yeah, go look. Yeah, definitely go look that up. The B bender system. There's a couple of easy, like, short videos of people being like, check this out. This is crazy. Fun fact number 2, Clarence nearly scooped Parsons and the Byrds' first attempts at being kind of the first country rock band single. In 1964, he was begging his own bluegrass band, the Kentucky Colonels, to accept a producer's assignment to record an electrified like rock version of Bob Dylan's Mr. Tambourine Man. And as we noted, the Byrds instead picked that up and had a bit of a hit on their hands with it. And then finally, fun fact number 3, Clarence White's band, the Kentucky Colonels version of Dueling Banjos is the one that's used on the soundtrack for the movie Deliverance.
Nice.
Yes. And the scene before everything goes wrong.
Yeah, exactly. So at this point, 1969, Chris Hillman leaves the Byrds. He's angry about the band's management, misappropriating their money, and just the usual nonsense that comes from the music industry.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the first time somebody leaves the Byrds, it feels like.
Yeah, I wanted to butt in here and say the Byrds has to be like the most left band of all time.
Yeah.
Famously by David Crosby, and then like almost every single other member other than Jim McGuinn will leave. They will form other bands. They will rejoin the Byrds. They will rejoin those other bands. They will switch which bands they're in. The only other person who stays in the Byrds for a super long time is Clarence White, who we just talked about.
Yeah, it's getting a little bit like Charlie Day explaining the conspiracy theory board, seeing which band, which person goes to which band.
Yeah, with the pins and the strings. Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, at this point though, Chris Hillman, bit of a free agent, Gram as well, but they still, they made their peace and they formed the Flying Burrito Brothers alongside bassist Chris Etheridge, who was actually in Gram's Harvard era band, the International Submarine Band, and pedal steel guitarist, I love this name, Sneaky Pete Kleinow, who later went on to become lead animator for a little show called Gumby. You 80s kids might remember that one. And he also worked on some stop motion for Empire Strikes Back. I mean,
yes,
I
can see how one leads to the other too.
Yeah, like if he wants to grab a beer anytime, I'm down. I don't know if he's still around, but yeah, that guy's got to have some stories.
Yes, please contact us.
So yeah, at this point, Flying Burrito Brothers are often at it. They had this goal, still of bridging country music with the cool sensibilities. They released the album The Gilded Palaces of Sin in 1969. One I think we both actually enjoyed when we listened to over the last week, and really kind of saw that like, okay, this is starting to make sense, the sound that they're going for and that middle ground.
Yeah, I had run into that one actually before this week. I can't exactly recall how. It might have just been researching something like, who was inspiring Wilco or
totally
Orville Peck or something like that, and it popped up, and I had listened to that one before and enjoyed it a lot. That
totally makes sense. Yeah. So this one actually had, like I said, a little bit of success, peaked at 164 on the Billboard charts, like didn't set the world ablaze, but it charted. That's a start. Some of the songs on there, Hot Burrito #1, Hot Burrito 2, Sin City, which is a song about Los Angeles, not about Vegas, which is called Sin City anyway. But a good song. And then, well, kind of a disclaimer note, not sure if it's a good or bad thing. This album is often credited as the inspiration for the Eagles, Linda Ronstadt, but, really just kind of a jumping off point for multiple generations that embrace the idea that, country and rock, they could find some middle ground.
Yeah, and by this time, Gram has now given an actual name to the combination of country, rock, soul, folk, and psychedelic music that he's trying to make real. He starts calling it cosmic American music. It's one of those things where he's often don't call it country music, call it this. I think the Flying Burrito Brothers Gilded Palaces of Sin is probably my favorite of his. Throughout his career here, he's kind of moving the dial back and forth on how much rock and how much country is going to be in this music and project. And for me, the Flying Burrito Brothers and that album specifically are kind of that's my sweet spot for for where he had the dial. I think that album is really, really good. It just sounds different. It sounds right. And
yeah. No, it definitely, the formula is pretty dialed in at that point. It feels like. Around a year later, they had this album. They're doing some shows. But Gram at this point starts drifting further into addiction. And the Flying Burrito Brothers, became a bit of a mess, or as you might say in some countries, a shit show. They became heavy in debt. Gilded Palace, yes, it got attention and sold, but it wasn't sustained, to give them this long-term commercial success, and well-reviewed too. But yeah, he started getting into, coke and mushrooms and things of that nature, which really put a downer on the live performances. When they were on stage, he was a total wreck. So really not doing himself any favors there. And then I don't know if you have more info on this, but running a perpetual poker game while on tour, where the band would lose money to roadies and just people who were there and along for the ride or there for the night. And
I tried as hard as I could to find out more info about this, because it sounded so wild that they were losing enough money for it to be notable on a perpetual poker game. that it's mentioned in multiple places, but I didn't really get much more of a story about it. But I did also, just on my own note, I found it funny that Chris Hillman leaves the Byrds over management misappropriating funds, and then goes and joins the Flying Burrito Brothers, who are apparently losing all of their own money in a perpetual poker game. So I guess he doesn't have a problem with misappropriating funds. He has a problem when it's not him doing it.
Do as I say, not as I do. Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly. No, I mean, I can just imagine Gram sitting there on a head full of mushrooms, going all in on every single hand, because he's
and as noted,
seeing the kings and queens walk around.
Money is not a big of a concern for him as it probably is for the rest of the band here. So,
right. Exactly. He's fine enough to keep his habits going.
Yeah. That must be a golden era for roadies getting being on tour with this cool country rock band, and then at night, basically getting an extra bonus by taking them for all they're worth as well. Awesome.
Yeah. So at this point, the final blow to the Parsons era of the Flying Burrito Brothers came after their second album was released, Burrito Deluxe. It was kind of just a comp of older country standards, older Parsons songs. Yeah, and then cover of the Rolling Stones. Then unreleased Wild Horses. He was such close friends with them, as we had mentioned, that he had heard this music while they're working on it. He said, "Yeah, I'll use that. Why not?" And came in, laid it down, came out before theirs.
Yeah, and there's a little controversy around that. There is a possibility that Gram was actually the one who had written Wild Horses. The timeline on it being conceived of and recorded, and the Flying Burrito Brothers have it out first, but the Stones definitely have a demo of it made at that time that Gram would have heard. But then also there was a discovery at a Hard Rock Cafe that had a poetry book of Gram's where they found the lyrics for Wild Horses in it, kind of predating the whole thing. So yeah, it's very it's actually very murky.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I'd love to see that poetry book. That'd be kind of neat artifact to look at.
Yeah, should have looked up which Hard Rock Cafe has that. Oh well.
Yeah. Let's see. Yeah. So at this point, his final appearance with the Flying Burrito Brothers, Gram arrived at the last minute in a limousine. Again, this is a band losing money hand over fist in poker and not selling a ton of records. So really not warranting the limousine service, according to Chris Hillman. He was so wasted that night that he forgot most of the lyrics to the songs and began dancing like Mick Jagger on stage. So you can imagine that made Chris Tillman really happy. Oh, wait, no. He actually fired Parsons immediately. At which point Parsons, in typical Gram fashion, you can't fire me. I'm Gram. He was wrong, though. It did stick. And Gram was, again, a man without a band.
Yes. And at that point, we start moving into the era of where Grievous Angel kind of falls in. So we are going to take a little break and a little detour and check in on a segment we like to do called the Multiverse of Lists.
What do you know about the multiverse?
The multiverse. Fizz had his theories. He believed it was real and dangerous.
Well, he was right about both.
How dangerous are we talking this week?
The danger level this week, not too terribly dangerous, I would say. Although I am we have it spoilered out, so I can't see exactly. I remember one of these, and looking at the first one here, I don't think it's that dangerous, but I can't remember what the third one is. The third one might be dangerous. Let's see. So, if basically what we're doing is in this segment, we take out Doctor Strange's the Power Stone, the green one, the Eye of Agamotto, which he had loaned to us, and we use it to peer into alternate universes to see what this podcast might be about if we were taking on a different top 500 list. So let me give it a little rub here and see, Mr. Eye of Agamotto, what would we be reviewing if we were doing the Rolling Stone top 500 albums of all time? And over on their list, number 317 is Billie Holiday's 1958 album, Lady in Satin. I'm going to take a stab here and say neither of us was all that super familiar with this Billie Holiday album before today.
No, the album itself, no. I mean, I've heard her, plenty of times in passing, but I can't say I've ever put on this album.
Yeah. So I wrote down it's a vocal jazz album, a little bit different as it utilizes a full 40-piece orchestra rather than the traditional kind of small jazz combo band. It was the last album that was released in Billie's lifetime. She did have, much like Gram Parsons, the album after this of hers was posthumously released and also retitled as Last Recording. And that one was recorded in 1959 and then released shortly after she had died. At the time, it was not well reviewed and mostly noted as being, something that's kind of past her prime. But it's been reevaluated over time. For example, on the kind of contemporary 1979 Rolling Stone Jazz Record Guide, it only gets 2 stars. And then, of course, today, it's actually seen as number 317 on their top 500 albums of all time list. So, next list that we may be looking at would be the Letterboxd top 1,000 most watched films of all time. Perhaps if we were a movies podcast. And over there, the number 317 most watched film is Jon Favreau's 2003 holiday film, Elf.
Yes.
And I had kind of previewed this one with you because I have actually not seen Elf, a sin which, after I revealed, had me being threatened with having my white people card taken away. So I'm gonna let you take this one. What's up with Elf?
I think the reason you haven't seen it, I totally get, because some people, I don't think so much you as your significant other is not a fan of Will Ferrell. Mm-hmm. So like, if you're not, you're probably not going to find it very endearing.
This is a Will Ferrell heavy feature, I believe.
Yeah, it's him at his Will Ferrellist. Okay. James Caan plays his dad, does a good job in it. Zoe Deschanel's in it. It's become, I think, the Christmas story.
That's peak Zoe Deschanel time.
Oh, totally. It's become the Christmas story for this generation. I think it's pretty much on our TV in some form or another. Most of the year, once a month, but holiday time, like
at least
3-4 times a week. My wife's favorite movie. We've seen it like the musical on the Fifth Avenue Theater in Seattle. Nice. It's just a good story about kind of family and believing in all that, the Christmas spirit and things of that nature. And it's got plenty of hilarious moments and quotes to keep you coming back. But again, I can get why people wouldn't dive into it. If you're not a Will Ferrell guy, that totally makes sense.
Well, speaking of, Doctor Strange and the Eye of Agamotto and all that, this movie is kind of indirectly responsible for the creation of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, because as far as I know, this is what turns Jon Favreau from actor into Jon Favreau director. Mm-hmm. And if you're not aware, he is the one who directed the original Iron Man movie, which was kind of the proof of concept for Marvel movies, basically. And then later he's directing, he's basically in charge of like both Marvel and Star Wars's kind of Disney TV sections. Right. He's the one who got Mandalorian off the ground. So yeah.
An important movie in a number of ways. Yeah.
Yeah. To me, though, Jon Favreau will always be Pete Becker, who was one of Monica's boyfriends from Friends, circa 1997.
Yep.
They go out for a while, and then she breaks it off with him because he refuses to stop. He's like a millionaire or something. Like he's independently wealthy, but he wants to become a UFC fighter. Mm-hmm. And she stops going out with him because he gets put into traction during one of these matches, and he's like, I can't stop.
Right.
But yeah, that's actually a really early reference to the UFC, like in pop culture. This is way before they had any kind of mainstream success.
Right. This is barely like home video tapes at Blockbuster era.
Yeah. This is, they still have like their shows are still in like tournament format with people fighting multiple times a night, which does not happen anymore.
Dare to dream. Yeah.
Yeah. But for any, ancient classic UFC fans, which I was, that era is kind of like Mark Coleman, Tank Abbott, Frank Shamrock before he became a WWE guy, Dan Severn. And also that's the time of Mark Kerr, who you might recognize as he's the mixed martial artist who's getting his own biopic, which is starring The Rock and directed by Benny Safdie. I believe it's Benny, going into his own kind of solo way. And I heard it. I can't remember exactly what film festival it was, but I guess it got like one of those like
I think Toronto.
It was like an insanely long standing ovation. So apparently people are into it.
Yeah, it was 15 minutes, I think, and I mean, like, I don't know.
Yes,
what
I did.
The norm is.
I saw a clip. I saw a clip of Benny and The Rock basking in that, and it looked like the Rock was, looked like the Rock was pretty emotionally affected. But yeah, I mean, from everything I've heard, he's put all his chips on that one, in being able to kind of shake his movie reputation and maybe get more into serious stuff. So
are we looking at a statement in 2026 when, like, we say the first WWF champion nominated for an Oscar?
Is he? there's no others.
I mean,
are you telling me that Roddy Piper did not get an Oscar nomination for either They Live or Hell Comes to Frogtown?
Damn well should have.
Yes,
but it doesn't mean they did. I mean, I'm trying to think. Hulk Hogan. What are you going to get? Suburban Commandos, John Cena.
The one where he's the babysitter? Or?
Yeah. Batista, maybe, and like,
Oh, he may, Batista might beat him out. We'll see.
He could someday, yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's real interesting. Batista's probably not going to be happy if The Rock scoops him on that. He's put in the time.
Maybe, maybe one day we'll get to
But The Rock's been doing a little bit of a different kind of movie than him.
Right. But maybe we'll get to a point where, him and The Rock are both nominated for the same category and they can fight it out on stage.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Nice.
Oh,
that's a thought.
I think they're doing it at the White House these days anyway. So
yeah. Yeah, that's where we're heading. That's the moment that's going to cause the singularity. We're all going to get pulled into the black. Somebody in behind the scenes of this universe is going to go, all right, that's enough.
We're restarting.
We'll fall into the black hole or whatever. Inshallah. So finally, perhaps if this was a podcast about video games, we might be looking at maybe Metacritic's top video games of all time. And over there, once again, one that you may have more to mention, but over there, number 317 is MLB 11, The Show, which is a baseball game for those of you not aware. So that was released in March of 2011. It is a PlayStation 2 era game. It's actually looks like just in the transition between PlayStation 2 and 3, which was kind of a very, very long transition period because everybody and their mother had like 2.5 PlayStation 2s. Mm-hmm. So it was very, very hard for the industry to kind of shake making releases for that one. It was the second year in a row that Minnesota Twins catcher Joe Mauer was the cover athlete. Interestingly. The major change for the series was the sports game boondoggle that refuses to ever die, which is trying to port every possible control that you have to the analog sticks.
Why?
In this game, it's known as, quote, the pure analog control system, and it introduced analog stick controls for hitting, pitching, and fielding.
Right.
Yeah. To me, it's always very hit and miss. Trying to
good one.
This thing. Oh, yeah, there you go. It's always like for Skate, a game that is about to return to our lives. Putting all of the controls on the right analog stick for Skate is kind of a revelation. It's a really good representation of what is happening on a skateboard to do a trick, and it ends up being kind of genius. But then I feel like it totally ruined NBA games for me. Like doing so much different things on the stick, or just on the right stick, and like trying to do like handle moves and shooting and God knows what else. Like I can't wrap my head around that one. And then for the NFL games, Madden, I think it's kind of a wash. It's maybe a net negative. They have the hit stick, but they also have QB controls and stuff on it, and like it doesn't work for me.
Yeah, no, I mean, I know it's because I was brought up on Genesis and those sort of things, but
we have buttons.
Right, just let me use the buttons, and you can keep your analog, and if some people like it, great, do it. But even on this game, when I played it, give me the one button I need to press square when the ball comes and I'll hit it. Give me.
I mean, I think
when
they
I
give
catch
us
the ball
option now of going back
Yeah.
to buttons, but because of that, probably enough people have been like done with this. But yeah,
I mean, you got to push things forward to get it, but at the same time, like if it's not broke, don't fix it.
and I also wrote down new features for this entry. Also included stereoscopic 3D mode for anyone who happened to have a 3D TV at the time. They added stadium-specific broadcast angles and stadium-specific jumbotron graphics and fireworks displays. And then they also added a home run derby mode using the PlayStation's kind of Wiimote ripoff accessory, the Move controller. Speaking of things that didn't quite take off.
Yeah. No, I can definitely say I put a good amount of hours on this one, trying to see what it would take to get the Mariners finally to a World Series and to win it. And,
Oh yeah, that's playing hard mode.
Yeah, exactly. You basically had to turn the difficulty down all the way on the simulation, and it took about 10 years to cheat the game into trading you all the good players. And by then, I think I got one. But I remember even in the game, it was like, wow, 2027, we're going to win the World Series. 16 years later, all right.
It's possible.
Hey, yeah. The future is yet to be written, so we'll see.
Yeah, nothing is, nothing's totally out of the realm of possibility for sports.
Exactly. Yeah.
Sometimes.
The Seahawks did it. Why can't the Mariners?
Why can't they indeed?
Yeah.
Welcome to Sports Talk, Indy 500.
Absolutely. But hey, we're not a... Well, I guess we are a little bit of a show.
What is this? Well, what's going on? Okay.
Well, hey, let's
return.
Exactly. Let's get back to it. So we're actually going to take a look real quick at the time that the album was released. The ambiguous, as you put it, January 1974. Sorry, was the release of Gram Parsons' album Grievous Angel. So some number one songs in America during that time: "Time in a Bottle" by Jim Croce, "The Joker,"
Excellent.
Steve Miller Band. Oh yeah,
song.
I mean, let's just.
Some people call me Maurice, because I speak of the pompatus of love. People talk about me, baby, say I'm doing you right.
Excellent song.
Yeah, we know that one pretty well. Other songs, let's see, "Show and Tell" by Al Wilson, "You're 16" by Ringo Starr. That's kind of suggestive, isn't it?
Yeah, let's not look any further.
Let us not. Yeah. And the number one song in the UK for the first half of the month, a little Christmas hangover, was "Merry Xmas Everybody" by Slade.
Hey, interesting. Slade is back, right? They were here last week, I believe, they were the originators of "Come On, Feel the Noise."
Yes. Let's take a little listen to this gem here.
Does he ride a red-nosed reindeer? Does it turn upon his sleigh? Do the fairies keep it so for a day? So here it is, Merry Christmas.
Yeah, apologies to Dupe. You are still in the basement. That is categorically better than Dupe.
I mean, I was about to start a discussion of like what's more pandering, like a Christmas song or like a post 9/11 country song, but I don't know. They all have their own special layers of
it's
gross.
It's the same.
Yeah.
It's the same. I was going to say it's the same. Nothing else is coming to mind, and this sounds a little harsh, but I was going to say vile sentiment.
Hall marketing.
Yeah, there you go.
January, interesting time. There's this Homer Nixon fellow that keeps coming up. January 2nd, President Richard Nixon imposes the national 55-mile-per-hour speed limit. January 4th, President Richard Nixon refuses to hand over the Watergate tapes. Those are not demos, by the way. Those are actual incriminating evidences we find later.
Yeah, and that was the end of that.
Yeah, exactly. January 13th, Super Bowl VIII. The Dolphins beat the Vikings 24-7. As you recall, on our last football comp episode, we talk about how the Vikings had all these Super Bowls but no wins. So one of their many documented struggles, yes. January 15th, Happy Days begins its 11-year run on ABC. So the number one movie in the first week of January in America was Papillon, a prison break drama starring Dustin Hoffman and Steve McQueen. Have you ever heard of that one?
I definitely haven't seen it. I feel like I've seen the poster or the like VHS cover a lot though.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I was kind of surprised. Like, it's probably crossed my path, but I don't remember it. But with Steve McQueen and Dustin Hoffman, it's pretty prominent, you know? Not bad. But the following week, number one film was The Exorcist, which stayed at number one for 12 weeks, and really kind of one of the defining high water marks of, I'd say, of the horror genre. So,
yeah, that's always one of those where I'm like, that was in 1974. Like, people who were
right,
people like people like David Crosby are making albums and then going out and seeing The Exorcist. Like, Jesus,
right, right. It's definitely strange, yeah,
yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean, that's a movie 51 years old now, you know, and how many cuts and iterations and rescans, but now still a timeless one. And you know what our mothers do in hell is really just not the issue here. We'll just not talk about that.
Indeed. But yeah, like, you know, speaking of people who are working and existing at the same time as apparently The Exorcist coming out, Gram Parsons. Back to his story.
Does the power of Christ compel him?
Yes, I'm jumping back a little bit because there is a little bit of prehistory to the actual album itself that kind of plays in here. But I'll pick up where you left off. So having been dismissed from the mess that was the Flying Burrito Brothers in the year 1970, Gram spends about 2 years in hiatus. Most of his time is spent hanging out with the Rolling Stones, doing drugs and traveling. In 1971, him and his girlfriend spend about 2 months living in the south of France in a apartment complex / studio / zoo called Nelcott. And again, a trademark of this podcast, I did not look up the pronunciation. It's French though, so you know, figure it out on your own.
I can't even get past the /zoo part, so you're good on my end.
Okay, yeah. Hopefully I've tied everybody's minds up with that.
Yeah.
But the complex is in the south of France and it's owned by Keith Richards. Gram's time living there coincides with the Rolling Stones attempting to record Exile on Main Street in the same building in the basement. They were using their mobile studio, which I believe had come into the podcast before because I think it was being used to also record portions of David Bowie's Diamond Dogs, who was also, you know, another guy who was kind of orbiting around the Stones. I don't know if it was at the same time. I can't remember, but so Gram was noted as a kind of positive influence on the sound of the record. It will shock you to hear that the kind of country rock elements of Exile on Main Street are noted as, you know, being from him to Keith. But he's also
he really got Keith into that sound, didn't he?
Yes. So but he is also noted as a very bad influence on Keith Richards. The two are noted at this time to be staying up all night, drugging, drinking, and passing a acoustic guitar back and forth, playing country songs, which would often leave Keith in no state to be recording the next day when the rest of the Stones were coming in. So soon after that, the French police actually pressure the Stones to clear out that Nelcott building of its battalion of drug users, which kind of it gives the band the final excuse or push to send Gram packing out of Nelcott. But before that, Keith does strongly suggest to Gram that he should, make another go at music and maybe have it be a solo thing. He is kind of a newfound believer in Gram's everlasting war to marry rock and roll and country, and tells him that in being kind of booted out of the Rolling Stones Mickey Mouse Club did bum out Gram a lot. His wife noted that he was kind of devastated at the whole prospect, but he did eventually make his way back from France to Los Angeles, and he successfully campaigned to get re-signed by Warner Brothers for a solo album. And so for that album, the way he conceptualized it was he felt he had spent so long trying to kind of purposely fuse rock and country, and like I said, like moving the dial back and forth. This time he really wanted to just try and make his version of a country album and kind of let the other influences come as they may. So his very first solo album is called GP, and I am skipping back this way because basically GP and Grievous Angel are impossible to separate from each other. They're essentially like one long recording session with a few breaks for touring in between. They both share the exact same recording personnel. GP is recorded in the fall of 1972 and released in January 1973, and then Grievous Angel is recorded in the summer of 1973 and released in 1974. So it's basically like one solid year. The two were released so close together that Rolling Stone actually combined the contemporary reviews of both of them into one review after Grievous Angel was released. And I believe they actually got to... no, I guess that doesn't make sense. I was going to say, I thought I had... In their review, it sounded like they had reviewed Grievous Angel before Gram died, but I'm pretty sure Gram had died before it was even released. So I don't know, unless they had like an advanced copy or something. Because I remember reading it. I remember reading it and thinking that like the tense that they were using like did not really take that into account. But no, readers, do your own research on that. In the GP recording sessions, country royalty Merle Haggard had actually agreed to produce that album for Gram, but he backed out during the very first recording session. Gram's wife, Gretchen, kind of referenced Merle's, quote, own troubles and demons when talking about the split, and said that she believed losing Merle for those sessions was one of the like great disappointments of Gram's life. But he did go on. Yeah, he did go on. And despite working on a tight budget, Gram had managed for these recording sessions to hire the band that he had basically been like dreaming of playing of for a while, which was Elvis's Las Vegas backing band known as the Taking Care of Business Band. They were initially organized for Elvis in 1969 by a legendary guitarist known as James Burton. And they would be working with Elvis as his band from 1969 until he would die, I believe in 77. So that is the band that records both GP and Grievous Angel, and they include the guy I just mentioned, James Burton, playing guitar. He is actually a returning character for the podcast because he also played guitar on Gillian Welch's Revival. He was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2001. And
just as an individual or part of a group, or
just as an individual. And listeners with very good memories may remember that Rick Quinn in that episode noted that his Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction speech was actually given by Keith Richards, who was a longtime fan of his. In his career, he also performed or recorded with the Everly Brothers, Glenn Campbell, John Denver, Jerry Lee Lewis, Elvis Costello, Roy Orbison, Townes Van Zandt, among others. So again, no lightweight. He plays on the original version of the often covered and foundational rock song Susie Q by Dale Hawkins. He actually claims that he co-wrote that song along with Hawkins, but wasn't given credit. And pretty soon there's going to be a museum bearing his name opening in Shreveport, Louisiana,
cool.
which is going to showcase his guitar and classic cars collection, which is pretty badass.
That sounds fun.
Yeah, another member of the Taking Care of Business band, Glenn Hardin, who plays organ and piano on Grievous Angel and GP. He also played with Roy Orbison, John Denver, and he would later go on to be part of Emmylou Harris's band. On bass, they had Emery Lee Gordy, who also goes on to play with Emmylou Harris's band. And notably, he also married Patty Loveless in 1989. After retiring, he becomes a staff producer for MCA Records in Nashville. And he makes albums with Steve Earle in Alabama and others. And then, again, from the Taking Care of Business band, Ron Tutt plays drums on both GP and Grievous Angel. At varying times, he was the principal drummer for the Carpenters, Roy Orbison, Neil Diamond, and Jerry Garcia.
Wow.
His credits as a session drummer are crazy, crazy long. Some of the names I just grabbed at a glance while going through that list would be Quincy Jones, Barbra Streisand, Billy Joel, the Captain and Tennille, Elvis Costello, Los Lobos, and Andy Williams.
Williams.
Yes. Apologies to Nelson once, but I could not confirm whether or not he played on Moon River. Yeah. However, easily the most consequential hiring decision during the GP sessions and Grievous Angel would be the young lady who is probably the next most important name next to Gram. Well, I mean, there's no probably about it. She absolutely is the most important name next to Gram Parsons on both of these albums. But that is the lady I had mentioned just a bit ago, Emmylou Harris. She, and actually, if it wasn't for some of the posthumous changes to the Grievous Angel record by Graham's wife, she would have actually been like a principal credit on the album. It would have been titled out to Gram Parsons with Emmylou Harris. Oh. And she also would have appeared on the album cover when they in a photo of her and Graham on a motorcycle.
The jealous, jilted wife. Yep.
Yeah, a little bit. The note I had was that she was never a big fan of Graham and Emmylou's relationship, although we don't have any positive confirmations of any philandering going on. So
yeah, sometimes it's doesn't really make much of a difference. Hurts all the same. Yeah, I think I had mentioned too during the week. It reminds me of the Homer recording Lurley and Lumpkins.
Oh, yes, this has to be. Yeah, this has to be at least a part of the influence for that.
Yeah, Marge in the studio grinding her teeth.
Finally, we got it.
Sorry, Lurleen, we're getting some sort of grinding sound on the track here.
Yeah. So, Emmylou Harris, she was born in Birmingham, Alabama in 1947. As a teen, she was fascinated by Bob Dylan and Joan Baez. And she was gifted a guitar by her grandfather, which she quickly became proficient at, and began playing in coffee houses around Boston and New York. In 1969, she drops out of college and begins performing as a folk artist full-time. But even though she was signed and released a solo album, which was called Gliding Bird, she didn't find much success at that time, and the label that she was signed to actually fell into bankruptcy. So after that, she takes one more big swing and attempts a move to Nashville, along with, I believe, her husband at the time. And both her music career and the marriage do not pan out while she is in Nashville. And she is forced to return home and live with her parents in Washington, D.C. She settles into working a day job, I believe as a waitress there, and then also playing small clubs with a small following around in the local area. But she does say that at that time she had considered her professional music career to be over. She didn't think it was going to happen. But there was one song that she would perform at that time, which was a cover of a 1952 country single. It was called It Wasn't God Who Made Honky Tonk Angels. And so she said it was actually mostly as a joke because she was not a country artist at the time and she didn't know anything about the genre. But one night, the post-Parsons Flying Burrito Brothers had gone and seen her perform while they were out drinking at a bar after one of their DC shows. And Chris Hillman, a name we should be familiar with at this point, who's still in the Flying Burrito Brothers after Gram, he remembered that Gram was actually looking for a female singer to support him during his solo album recording. And he called Gram and said, "Hey, here's someone you need to check out." And yes, I believe we have a clip where she talks about this. Actually, I think we have like 3 clips and I totally forgot that we had them. So maybe we'll just figure out where to shove those in at some point. But yeah,
back in LA, Gram and Gretchen moved to the exclusive Chateau Marmont Hotel, while Gram started work on his solo career.
When we were doing Gram's first album, GP, he was living here with his wife. It's a little oasis right in the middle of the Sunset Strip in Hollywood. Gram wrote music here in the room, and he also occasionally he'd sneak down the hall where they had a grand piano, and he could be heard in the evenings sometimes tinkling, writing, or just it was his refuge, and it was a very comforting place for him.
My involvement is I'm sitting home one day and the telephone rings and it's Gram Parsons, who I hadn't seen in a year or even heard about. He said, "Do you think there's a deal here in town for me?"
I get a call from Gram. He said, "I got a deal." Ed Tickner, his manager, got him a deal with Warner Brothers, and he said, "We're going in the studio." And he was so excited. And I said, "Well, great. Let's do it, you know."
Gram was looking for a female singer to sing with. Because on the lines of George Jones and Tammy Wynette, he hit the lottery jackpot when it came to finding Emmylou. It's actually Chris Hillman who told him about Emmylou.
I said, "There's a young lady up in Georgetown. You need to call her up and talk to her. She's great." And I had to convince him. I had to twist his arm to make that phone call, but he did. He called her from my room.
So when he called me up, and said, "This is Gram Parsons," I kind of went, and he had to kind of tell me who he was. He came down and sat in with me and said, "I'll call you." And I didn't really think he would. I got a ticket in the mail, and I just went out there. I had no idea. I didn't know what to expect. Didn't know what was going to happen.
So tell us, Breddy, what happened?
Well, first off, one of the downsides of playing clips like this on the podcast is we can't really, you don't have like the names, that you see on the video at the bottom of the screen. But obviously at the end that was Emmylou Harris. The other one I wanted to note was I believe the first voice you hear there is Gram's road manager and a close friend at the time named Phil Kaufman, who becomes a recurring character from here on out. But yeah, after the recording of GP, Gram cobbles together a touring band that he calls the Fallen Angels Band, which is comprised of oddly, instead of any of the, floating around people from the Byrds Extended Cinematic Universe, he just gets together a bunch of friends who either, sometimes they know how to play, sometimes they don't, but it's just people who he was hanging out with. And of course, Emmylou Harris is invited back as well. The rehearsals for those shows are kind of famously unserious and unproductive. They're noted as more just kind of recurring parties where they would just sort of play more than
sort of
actual
get
practice
high.
sessions.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly. And unsurprisingly, when they take off for that tour, the first couple of shows are a complete disaster. Emmylou Harris says that they were unsure of how to start or stop songs for the first couple of shows. But interestingly, eventually they do get that band into shape. A lot of it has to do with Emmylou Harris being, more serious than the rest of them, and she kind of takes over as a sort of a band leader. And then she also becomes a bit of a Gram Parsons whisperer, where she can kind of coax really good performances out of him, even when he's otherwise at his worst. So as I mentioned, as the tour goes on, the band itself actually tightens up significantly, especially Parsons and Emmylou Harris's kind of their duets become sort of the backbone of the whole thing. And actually, that exact moment of the band is actually captured via some archived soundboard recordings that are the subject of it was a Kickstarter campaign to release a live album from a couple of those shows. The Kickstarter was actually done. It was put on by Parsons' daughter Polly and a guy named David Prinz, who is a Gram Parsons super fan and also one of the owners of a trio of California record stores called Amoeba Music. You may recognize them. They have a web series that's kind of a big thing now called What's in My Bag, where when musicians or celebrities come to one of their stores, they'll often interview them and ask, what are they buying or what else is actually in their bags that they're carrying.
Kind of a Criterion Closet type segment.
Yeah, precisely. So that release, it's available on vinyl and CD, but not streaming. So this may cause me to buy my first CD in 25 years or something like that. It's titled Gram Parsons and the Fallen Angels, The Last Roundup. The project itself had a $50,000 Kickstarter goal, and they ended up doubling it. And not only that, but they also gained the support of Emmylou Harris herself. She threw in recordings of her unreleased folk demos as one of the reward tiers for pushing that Kickstarter past its goal. Yeah. And also, interestingly, that live album and the project they put together, they ended up using the photo that was replaced on Grievous Angel for the cover. So the photo of that is the motorcycle photo I had mentioned of Gram and Emmylou. So GP, the first solo album, again, as is normal for Gram's country rock releases, it does not do so great commercially. But this time around, it is kind of beloved critically. There's a lot of very good contemporary reviews for that album, and it was kind of showing signs that people were starting to get the kind of cosmic American music thing that he was going for.
Building little by little. Yeah.
Yeah. In the liner notes to that album, in the liner notes to a 1982 compilation that a lot of GP tracks show up on, Elvis Costello writes about GP. He says, quote, Gram Parsons had helped create a Frankenstein's monster, country rock. But his first Warner Brothers LP, GP, paid no allegiance to this style. The songs are of lost or stolen love crossed with an occasional R&B beat. And if that should fail to move you, then you have a big problem. And I concur with Mr. Costello.
Oh, I got a problem.
Yeah. hints of what's to come, perhaps. Okay, so now we've actually finally arrived at this week's album, the one that ends up on the Enemy Magazine's top 500 albums of all time list at number 317, called Grievous Angel. So prior to the Grievous Angel recording sessions, Parsons and Harris play another little 4-show mini tour to kind of warm up and rehearse material. And that show would actually reunite Gram with a close friend who we had talked about earlier on this episode, Clarence White, who was the guitarist who replaced him when he left the Byrds. White was playing as part of the backing band that Parsons and all the other bands on the tour were kind of sharing. And that tour actually also included the Kentucky Colonels band, which was Clarence White's band. But sadly, right after that tour, Clarence White is struck by a drunk driver while he's loading equipment for another show and dies. And Gram plays a few songs acoustically at his funeral, but he also has a conversation with Phil Kaufman, his road manager, that would later prove somewhat fateful. And there's a interview with Phil Kaufman from a website called Louder Sound where he says, just a couple of months before he died, Gram and I went to the funeral of the Byrds guitarist Clarence White, and we'd had a few sherbets before we went, and we were saying to each other that if Clarence had his choice, he wouldn't have chosen that kind of high mass Catholic funeral with all the mumbo jumbo. And Gram said to me, "This is bullshit. If I die, I want somebody to have a few beers, take me out to the Joshua Tree Park desert, and burn my body." And I said, "All right, it's a deal, but would you do the same for me?" And Gram said, "Yeah." So this is the first mention here of Joshua Tree Park, but in the late 60s, Joshua Tree had kind of become an important part of Gram's life. He would often spend weekends there. He said his favorite activity was taking psychedelics and going out and exploring the desert. And perhaps related, he claims to have sighted UFOs while out there.
Oh.
So the actual recording,
find your soulmate, Gram.
Yeah, the actual recording of Grievous Angel, as I noted, took place in summer of 1973. It's recorded in a Hollywood studio called Wally Heider Studio 4. This is a somewhat famous studio. Other albums recorded there include CCR's Bad Moon Rising single, Neil Young's self-titled debut, Santana's Abraxas, American Beauty by the Grateful Dead,
Wow.
Electric Warrior by T-Rex, Small Change by Tom Waits, featured on this podcast not too long ago, something called Fleetwood Mac's Rumors, Long After Dark by Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, and an interesting one that I noted, all of the soundtracks to the Charlie Brown TV specials were recorded here as well.
Wow.
Yes.
So. Do you happen to know if it's still around?
I believe it is.
Cool.
Yes. So the personnel, again, were mostly the same as the GP sessions, the Taking Care of Business band, but a few other names did drop in. Bernie Leeden, a former Flying Burrito brother, would come in and play backup guitar on several tracks. Bernie would actually later go on to become a founding member of the Eagles. So once again, we have an episode that the Eagles are kind of haunting here.
Man, come on. I had a rough night and I hate the fucking Eagles, man.
Same. Very same. Linda Ronstadt, also previously mentioned, contributes harmony vocals on the final track of Grievous Angel, In My Hour of Darkness. So initially for these tracks, Gram is he's in bad shape. He is attempting to work his way through drinking and heroin addiction. So for a while, the Taking Care of Business band players are kind of tracking without him for a long time. And Emmylou Harris would make a few attempts to kind of drag Gram into the studio and see if he could, see if he could do the job. The first couple of times he couldn't. But as time goes on, he does start to shape up. And, everybody interviewed about the session says, about halfway through, Gram does start to rally. He starts to become very excited about the music that's being recorded. So much so that, even though this is another outing where it's a lot of kind of older songs of his and covers or standards, he does write two original tracks while they are in the sessions. And that would be the very first track, The Return of the Grievous Angel, and then the closing track that I just mentioned, In My Hour of Darkness. Those were both written in studio. So as Gram is really finishing off this album and going through the mastering process, everybody who's interviewed about this time says that he is like ecstatic and he is super confident, and he's telling all of his friends at that time that he's really happy about it, and he thinks that he has finally achieved the cosmic American music sound that he had always kind of imagined. He thinks that this one is the one where he's figured it out.
Nice. So
now we move on to another tragic bit of the story. So to celebrate that record's completion, and before another planned tour, Parsons goes on a short vacation out to Joshua Tree National Park, along with his girlfriend at the time, Margaret Fisher, his assistant, Michael Martin. Actually, Margaret Fisher might have been somebody else's girlfriend because Gram was married at the time, and I don't think he was doing the David Bowie thing. So I don't know. Double check me on that. Anyways,
I mean, it would explain his wife's not fanhood of Emmylou Harris if he was already stepping out. So.
Yeah. So he also took along his assistant, Michael Martin, and Michael Martin's girlfriend, Dale McElroy. On the second night there, Gram challenges the entire group to a drinking contest at the Joshua Tree Inn bar. At least two of them, for various reasons, are not big drinkers, and Gram basically tells them, all right, well, I'll make up for you, and ends up getting very, very drunk. He wanders off into the desert alone and kind of loses his group. And then later he returns to the Joshua Tree Inn where they're staying, meets a woman he doesn't know, and ends up doing morphine with her and overdosing in her room. He is resuscitated that night by his friends that he had come along with, but he later dies in his own room on September 19th, 1973. And so Gram's wife, Gretchen, in the Fallen Angel documentary about his death, she says, quote, he was a victim of the times. He wasn't doing anything that anyone else was doing. He just didn't have the constitution for the kind of rock and roll lifestyle. And in that respect, he was definitely more of a country boy. So Gram's funeral arrangements are organized by his family, who he's a little bit estranged from. They obviously don't take much heed to the idea that Parsons' friends are insisting that, he had said that he wanted to be cremated and have his ashes spread at Joshua Tree Park. And his stepfather, Bob Parsons, makes arrangements for his body to be flown back from LA to New Orleans for a funeral. And at this point, I am going to read an extended account from Phil Kaufman, his friend and road manager that we had mentioned before. So here we go. Quote, and this is from an interview with Phil Kaufman from Louder Sound magazine. After Gram died, I stayed home at my house on Chandler in Los Angeles for a couple of days, but I knew what I had to do. I had to fulfill my promise to Gram. So I called the mortuary in Joshua Tree to find out where Graham's body was, and they told me that he was en route to Continental Airlines at LAX. And from there, he would be shipped back to his stepfather in New Orleans. As it happened, Dale McElroy, who was with Graham and Joshua Tree, owned a big Cadillac hearse. And so I told her I wanted it, and I needed her boyfriend, Michael, to help me. So Michael and I set off in this hearse wearing our Sin City jackets and cowboy hats. And our whole team was with me. Our whole team was me, Michael, assisted by Jose, Jack, Jim, and Mickey, which is a reference to Jose Cuervo tequila, Jack Daniel's whiskey, Jim Beam bourbon, and Mickey's Big Mouth beer.
Yeah, I mean, that's plenty of friends that'll influence you and help out.
Yes, yeah. He says we were pretty well oiled. They had a holding area in the hangar at the airport where they take caskets for their shipment. And we got there at about 10 o'clock on the Thursday night. So yeah, you'll note the difference in airport security between 1974 and post 9/11 era.
Yeah. Can't just wander on the tarmac in the hangars, huh?
You can't just you can't just drive up anymore. So this is a quote from Bill Hill, who was the LA County coroner at the time. He says, quote, "Before the casket could be loaded aboard the plane, I was told that 2 individuals in a funeral coach arrived and told the attendant that the family had decided to ship instead from the Van Nuys airport." So Phil Kaufman again. At first, and he's talking about this attendant, at first he was suspicious. He was looking at the way we were dressed. So I said, we were doing overtime. And basically I hustled him into hurrying up. And as I'm signing the papers, I sign using the name Jeremy Nobody. And at the time, a police car pulls up and blocks our exit. The cop gets out and he's just standing around. So I yell at him, "Hey, give us a hand with this stuff, will ya?" And he goes, okay. And the cop helped us load the casket onto the hearse. Michael gets behind the wheel, and as he drives out, he hits the hangar door. He notes that there's actually enough space in this hangar door for an actual plane to taxi in and out. So that's a bit of an achievement.
If anybody out there wants to animate this, by all means, let us know. And
yeah, this might be this is definitely a story that has been depicted. I don't know about it that way, but I'll talk about it later. But anyways, Kaufman says the cop looked at us and I'm thinking, boy, we're in trouble now. But he moves his car and off we went. We stopped at a gas station and bought 5 gallons of gasoline. And then off we went in our drunken stupor with Graham in the back and drove out beyond the Joshua Tree Inn. By now it's about 1 a.m. up into the national park until we reached Cap Rock, which is about as far as you could go. We open up the back of the hearse and the casket drops out as Michael is pulling it out. Michael is very edgy, but I decide that we have to say goodbye to Graham. So I open up the casket, and we used to do the thing, where you're a kid and you point to someone's chest and you look down and go zip up to their nose. And that was the last thing I did with Graham. And Michael was telling me, "Don't touch him, man." But I said, he's dead, right? So we poured gasoline over the casket and said, "All right, Graham, on your way." And I struck a match and threw it onto the gasoline. And when you do that, it consumes an enormous amount of oxygen and makes a big whoosh. And as we were watching, we see his ashes flying up into the night. And then we saw some headlights approaching from the desert. And we thought it was probably the park rangers, so we beat it. On the way back to LA, there was a lot of traffic, and there'd been some sort of accident. And we ended up rear-ending a car on the freeway. A cop leaned over and looked into the hearse just as Michael was opening his door, and a bunch of bottles fell out. And the cop says, "You two stay here," and handcuffs us together, and goes back to his car. Well, Michael is a skinny little guy, so he just slips his hand out of the cuffs, and we take off down the nearest ramp. And when we get back to my house, I get somebody to cut the cuffs off of me. Several days later, Graham's death hits the headlines in the local papers. Quote, "Rock star's body burned in bizarre desert ritual." And everybody in Los Angeles knows I did it, so it doesn't take long for the cops to figure it out. Eventually, we do end up in court. However, all they could charge us with was stealing and destroying the casket itself. The body itself has no intrinsic value, So unless somebody filed a complaint, there was no law broken. They fined us $1,300 because Graham's stepfather had bought the cheapest casket he could, and Dale paid the fine.
Wow.
A somewhat famous story that is usually, I was gonna note that me and you were maybe a little bit lucky because, previous to this, if you're familiar with Gram Parsons, this story kind of takes up an outsized amount of attention in his story. But, for us, we kind of get to take it all in as one big thing. So this is maybe, occupying its correct amount of attention when we talk about it.
Yeah.
It's
got a certain Hunter S. Thompson story vibe to it, doesn't it?
Yeah. This is the era.
Yeah.
Yeah. People were a little more free to get away with stuff like this.
I would do the same for you.
Okay.
If I had to.
I'm not requesting it, but I'll tell you, I'm not going to be mad if it happens.
Okay. I don't know if I'll drive to Joshua Tree. It's a little bit of a haul from here, but
get me up to Mount Rainier.
Just take it up the car. Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. But though a footnote here, to be fair to all parties involved, I did mostly want to quote Kaufman because his is a firsthand account of what happened, but obviously it's a very, very subjective view of kind of the overall incident. And it is made pretty clear in the Fallen Angel documentary that Graham's family, and in particular his two sisters, were and are very unhappy with what Phil Kaufman did. They and a few other people, not just them, kind of considered Kaufman to be a bad friend to Graham for doing this. And when he was alive, he was very much an enabler and kind of a fuck up. And they don't regard the whole incident as the kind of whimsical thing that most other people do. And
it's romanticized a little bit in the rock pantheon.
Very, very, very much so. And I will say from my further reading on Phil Kaufman's life that considering him an enabler and a fuck up is probably correct. Bad friend. I won't sign on to bad friend, but yeah. But speaking of portrayals, the entire incident actually was fictionalized as a black comedy movie called Grand Theft Parsons, which was released in 2003. Did you hear about this?
No.
Hear about this one? It stars Johnny Knoxville and Christina Applegate. And the reviews for it were mostly not great. But a lot of them do note that Johnny Knoxville is a surprisingly decent actor. He portrays Phil Kaufman.
Oh, he doesn't act as a man with no talent?
Yeah.
Looking at this, huh? Interesting.
Yeah, it's out there. I know we had all this time, but no, I didn't even make an attempt to go see if it might be. We'll have to see if it's on streaming or something. Is it? Do you know? Can you see if it's streaming anywhere?
Let's see. Grand Theft Parsons streaming.
Well, butt in when you can, but I'll continue here. To this day, there is an outcropping of rocks in Joshua Tree known to local rock climbers as the Gram Parsons Memorial Hand Traverse. And that spot hosts a lot of makeshift shrines and memorials to Parsons at the park. The room that Parsons died in at the Joshua Tree Inn is kind of decorated as a memorial to him, but it's also still rentable.
So, yeah, I found Grand Theft Parsons. It looks like it's kind of that free category on a lot of services.
Oh, it's like a Tubi type thing?
Yeah, exactly. Even like
maybe
Voodoo,
even on YouTube.
Yeah, it's on YouTube. It's on all the things. And yeah, it looks like a lot of places have it like free with ads type deal.
Okay,
so
yeah.
maybe not the best received movie, but it's there.
It's been 22 years and it wasn't very well reviewed at the time. So
yeah, I mean, honestly, I think I got to kind of watch it now after this.
Yeah, indeed. I might have blown past it a little bit, but this might be a good place for the second clip from that documentary to drop in. So apologies if we're rewinding a bit, but this is, good first down accounts and stuff to listen to about this kind of general time.
Want to scratch my itch, sweet Annie Rich.
After Clarence White's funeral, Gram went back to work on his second solo album, Grievous Angel, which would ultimately be hailed as his masterpiece. He checked into Capitol Records studios and used the same musicians who'd played on the GP album.
These guys don't only usually play for like Elvis or George Jones, you know what I mean? But they'd play for him.
This is Keith Richards talking.
He would sing a little bit, and he would ask everybody, how does it feel? I mean, everybody had a good communication with him, and he was really relaxed.
The music was excellent. He had a good selection of songs, and he had written some, and he had co-written some songs, and it was going very well.
Hearts on fire, my love for you brought only misery.
Before then, I had been kind of intrigued by what we were doing, and I loved the fact that I seemed to be pretty good at it, but it was more about me. And at that moment, it became about him, and it became about the music and what we did together.
It's not how tricky your chords could be, but how much passion you put into your music. And you could hear passion.
Well, with the Grievous Angel over, the album, Gram was very excited. He was getting ready. His career was on the move. The record company was happy with it. And we were getting ready for the tour. And Gram was going to go off to the desert. And that, then we all know what happened after that.
Well, now
he fixes the cable.
Yeah, now we all know what happened after that. So after Gram's death, his wife Gretchen, as I mentioned, does kind of flex a little bit of muscle over the final product of Grievous Angel. She alters the artist credit of the album from Gram Parsons with Emmylou Harris to just Gram Parsons, and kind of moves Emmylou's credit to the back cover. As I noted, she also changed the album's cover image from that photo of them on a motorcycle to Gram's head kind of floating on a sea of blue. And actually, a personal note here, I was 100% expecting to find that original photo and be like, oh, Mrs. Parsons, how could you? How dare you? But I think the photo is kind of a dud. It looks a little candid, not very well staged. And the replacement kind of has something, the one that we actually have on the album, like, it's not the best album cover I've ever seen, but, it has something to it. So, that might be somewhere where I go.
It does have that like early 70s. Yeah.
It does. Yeah.
Feel to it.
Yeah. It's got a little something. She did also, I didn't find a reason for this, but she did remove a track from the album called Sleepless Nights. I listened to it. Nothing jumped out at me exactly. He doesn't profess his love for any other woman or anything like that on there, at least as much as, any country track generally does. But that one and two other tracks were recorded during the Grievous Angel sessions that were never released along with the album. There was that one called The Angels Rejoiced in Heaven Last Night, and then one called Brand New Heartache. And actually, if you want to, you can listen to all three of those. There's a compilation album released a little later called, it's actually titled Sleepless Nights, and it's a bunch of unreleased Gram tracks and Flying Burrito Brothers tracks.
Nice. Yeah, I'm looking at the cover that became the Kickstarter album cover, and it's kind of like, if the wife's making the calls, I can see why they said, let's not do it.
Yeah. The Flying Burrito Brothers tracks on there too are also, I guess there was like a kind of, like last week we had mentioned, at least I think it was last week, Isaac Hayes' first album, where it was just kind of a thing they were doing and they were recording it. But
yeah,
he was like surprised that it was turned into an album. Like those sessions for the Flying Burrito Brothers were kind of the same thing. Like they were kind of forced into the studio by their label and were just kind of dicking around, like recording standards and practicing and stuff like that. And they were like, I'm pretty sure Chris Hillman has been like, we never intended for those to be released, but somebody wanted to make money off of it after Graham's passing. So there you go.
Profits to be had. And we're going to introduce a clip here. What was this clip? Do you remember?
Yeah. So this is the end of the Fallen Angels documentary, and it kind of does a good sum up of this time and the whole story. So I wanted to drop it here.
People should know his music. That should be his legacy, not the way he died.
He didn't touch any of those things that make monster sellers out of your records, but he did have a vision of going somewhere that no one else has gone before.
He had a profound respect for the tenets of American culture that gave us country music. I think he understood that.
He changed it, and the guy never had a hit record.
I wish Graham would have had a chance to live a little longer and record some more. That's what I'll say.
Graham's career goal was to die young and become a legend. He'll always be 26.
I don't think he had any sense of an ending. In fact, on the contrary, I think at that time it was almost like a new beginning because things were going so well.
And there isn't a better exit than, the early young death while you're still beautiful, and then the strange afterlife with the corpse being dragged into the desert.
Graham can never die. Like, Graham can never be at peace. It can't rest because people won't let him die.
That kind of haunts me. How they seem to like to celebrate his life on the anniversary of his death, and I relive it each time they do.
And tomorrow we will still be there.
Yeah, so that's a good sum up and a good transition into let's talk about kind of our opinions and our journey with this album. So people may be able to surmise, a couple of my opinions from before this, but I had mentioned I have a what I describe as kind of an inexplicable draw to alt country. There's really no origin or reason for it that I can find. It's just, I don't know. It just does it for me for some reason. So finding this and finding kind of the godfather of alt country, I enjoyed this album a lot.
Good. No, I mean, I'm kind of the other end of it. Like, I have an inexplicable, like, visceral reaction to country music. The more country music television, TNN, Alan Jackson kind of tunes it is, the less I like it. So I was not expecting to really enjoy this, and perhaps that's the wrong mindset to go into with an album like this and an assignment like this. But for me, it's kind of, I'm trying to think of an analogy for it, and it's like spicy food is the way I look at it. Like, I like things like Grateful Dead, Jerry Garcia Band, Allman Brothers. I like folk music. I like spicy food. Now, every day, how far am I going to push it? Maybe like a serrano pepper or something like that.
Yeah.
Now, if I go a little further into country music or go a little spicier into habanero, man, that's kind of pushing it right there. Like, I just don't react well to it. So this album and the Flying Burrito Brothers and even the Byrds album, like, very much on that line of like when it went country. Like one song in particular, the medley of songs from Northern Quebec or something like that, I think it's called.
Yes, which is actually neither a medley nor actually live.
Right. Fun titling and story behind it all and everything. But I mean, that one was just too country for me, and I didn't enjoy it. But some of the songs that are veering a little bit more, rock focused, I liked. Had nothing against it. So like between this album and the others and like the connected Gram Parsons stuff, like overall, good artist. If I'm listening to The Dead and Spotify decides to throw some on, I'm not going to skip it. It's not bad. But I think it didn't necessarily change my view and my outlook on country music, but it definitely gave me a cool appreciation for who Gram is and his story, and just how it intertwined with, a really interesting time in music and really what it went on to. I mean, like, just, I talked to my dad a little bit, who's a huge Keith Richards fan, and, he's read a number of Keith Richards biographies and books, and he's just kind of like talking about how, inseparable those two are. And I had never thought before, in listening to some of that, golden era Stone stuff, like, oh, well, who influenced that country sound? Oh, well, here's Gram Parsons. Like, yeah, maybe as I said in that clip, he never had a number one record, but he sure made some impact in music. He sure, touched some people's lives. Hey, here's somebody who brought us an Emmylou Harris who had all but given up on, her career. Like, okay, again, this is,
and she is now a Hall of Fame name for
right, exactly. Like, even somebody like me is just like, yeah, the talent is undeniable. Like, say what you want about country music, she's a legend.
And it's definitely not a stance I'm unfamiliar with, because, before, I would say 2006 or something, when Wilco's being there, like, that's the one that opened my eyes, and it's like, whoa, wait a second.
Right.
Before then,
to Wilco,
that was very much my attitude too.
Yeah. I mean, I've listened to Wilco. I didn't mind it. I've listened to Steve Earle, bits and pieces here and there. And again, like, I think having context, that these aren't necessarily guys with Confederate flags on the back of their trucks, helps a little bit. I think I carry a lot of negative stereotypes when I think of country music, which is, it's not good or bad. I think it's just where my mentality and my learnings are on it. So I think something like this is cool for me.
Yeah. I think one that probably explains it is that Gram Parsons walked so that Tom Petty could run, right? Like, yeah, this was the John the Baptist announcing, no, I'm mixing everything up, but I think I sent you at some point the animated GIF of Back to the Future. That might have been a bit much for you, but your kids are going to love it.
Exactly.
Right? Like,
exactly.
Like, people did not glom onto Gram Parsons commercially, but Tom Petty doing something that is very much not unrelated, he scores, like. And there's a direct line. I mean, they're even both Florida guys who made their way to LA. Like, there's so much of a shared story there, right? Like,
well, and there's so much to be said for, like, that all too familiar story in artistic endeavors, when it's like somebody's looking to redefine or push forward something. It may not be the first one to walk that gets the credit, and Gram, in some senses really didn't get the credit in his life that he is getting now. But, with how things unfolded, you can definitely say, like, yeah, he's probably a little bit ahead of his time. Or if somebody else had tried to, if it was just Chris Tillman trying to do this, maybe everybody looks and says, oh, those are all right. And then Gram Parsons comes along 20 years later. Oh, shit, Gram Parsons nailed this sound. Maybe he's the guy that, Tom Petty is, or Wilco is, or, some of these other names in the alt country scene. So, no, he's a cool character. I will say that.
Yeah, and I imagine the little bit of an extended period of research and listening probably helps. There's always a little bit of even on the albums that we're not like super into. You have the you have the assignment to listen to it, and like, when you can't help but end up loving some, even the ones that you're not like super into too. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and something like this too, it'd be real easy just to come on here and say, oh, fuck country music. Oh, it's gross, whatever. I don't want to listen to it again. But like,
especially because this is very much more traditional than even like the Flying Burrito Brothers stuff or like the Byrds stuff. Like, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think, like any other album that's new to me completely, like, giving it some context where it fit in, giving what the guy was trying to do, knowing the thought process behind it. Like, I can appreciate it. The album itself, am I going to put on? And, am I going to go buy a vinyl remaster? No. But at the same time, like I said, if something pops on from this album, hey, I know this song. Cool, right on. This is a fun study and, a really interesting story in music history.
Yeah. And we've threatened to do like an episode power ranking the albums that we've done so far. I think we may have did we rank them last time, or did we just talk about them when we did like a recap? I can't even remember. It's been such a anyways, what I was gonna say is
we had our own top 5, I think. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I suspect that where this one lands would probably shock you. for everything that we've done, it may be top 3 and it may not be number 3. I don't know. I'd have to really think about it.
Honestly, I don't know where you found the artist that did the theme song for this week, but
it felt very inspired, right?
Yes, I can definitely tell that artist probably really much enjoyed this, and it was cool. I feel like I kind of had my moment with like the Noi records and with Prodigy and things of that nature. Where it's like,
sometimes we go off down our own path. Sometimes we
exactly.
Sometimes we imbibe and then wander off into the desert on our own. For as many times as we're kind of Tillman and Gram Parsons in this thing, and on the same wave, like we definitely take divergent paths, and it's kind of every
fun
once in a while you have
to
drag your partner to country rock.
Yeah, exactly.
Sometimes you have to fist fight Jim McGuinn of the Byrds and say, hire a pedal steel guitarist or I'm out of here.
Sometimes you just straight up have to tell a cop to load his stiff body into the back of the hearse and get him there. That's all there is to it. No.
We're getting to this. Well, okay, so speaking of which, like my favorite track, to transition here to track by track, my favorite track on the album is the very first track on it after it kind of solidified like today and yesterday. This is the one, if I want somebody to sample what this album's going to listen to, I say go right here. I also think it's the best one on there. The like first 20 seconds of it, especially when I first played it and I didn't know what we were getting into. Okay. So let me describe the first 20 seconds of side 1, track 1 of Grievous Angel. Okay. The very first thing you're hit with is like a pedal steel guitar riff. Love it. Okay. The second is, Gram's country style singing. Also love it. He's got lyrics about asking a woman to come out onto the porch, which is, yeah, here we go. Okay. And then after all of this, the roundhouse kick to the head of Emmylou Harris coming in with harmonies on the whole thing. Like at about 23 seconds, like you're being bombarded with like everything this album possibly could have for you.
You've got the full plate of food from the buffet. Yeah. You are ready to go.
I'm like, like right there, I'm like, oh, well, what more could I ask for? Like I'm in. Right. Also on that track, there's a part in the middle that may be kind of a hat tip to Elvis. He says, right before the solo, he says, "Pick it for me, James," and that's something that Elvis can often be heard, like vocally handing off to James Burton for solos during his era, right there.
We know he was a fan, so yeah.
I love that song. I love the lyrics. There's a couple different spots. The one I'll quote. He says, and the man on the radio won't leave me alone. He wants to take my money for something that I've never been shown." I'm like, yep, that describes modern life quite well.
Isn't that about right? I mean,
so did you?
But he's also getting a shitload of money for doing nothing. So at the same time, we'll see.
But he knows when somebody's trying to take it.
It's true, yeah, or at least when they're on the other end of the poker game that's not ending. Yeah, schmuck. For
did
me
you have a standout track? Yeah. Let me hear.
I did definitely. I always thought Love Hurts, the later version, was a little cheesy, a little over the.
It absolutely is.
I really liked this version, with the harmonies, and it felt to capture the spirit of the lyrics a lot more than like the actual, the popular version later on down the road. It sounds like it's a much more of a song of sadness and despair than it is, meant to be this grandiose, like standing on top of the building, proclaiming love hurts. This is a more downtrodden, like pseudo blues, country blues type feel to it. And I really liked it, actually. That and, oh gosh, what was the one we called out? That was a little bit of the rocker. Was it
Ooh, Las Vegas?
Yeah, that one too. I really like that one. And I want to say Brass Buttons. Yeah, so there's a couple songs that I really did like on there. And yeah, I mean, like I said, the stuff that definitely leaned more country, not my favorite, no shocker there, but not enough, not bad. It's good for what it is. It's just not my cup of tea.
Yeah, the only down note I had on the album is there is a 3-song run from I Can't Dance through $1,000 Wedding where I'm like, these are good, not great. But I do like Brass Buttons a lot. Like I think I think it gets included because it's within, so I can say like, okay, these 3. But yeah, speaking of Love Hurts, so the power ballad version is by a rock band named Nazareth. They actually changed one of the lines from Love is like a stove to Love is like a flame, which is a little bit of a, hey, everybody can enjoy that kind of change. Nazareth was also one of Axl Rose's favorite bands. He asked them to play at his wedding.
Oh, wow.
And they declined, but as a wedding present, they gave him permission to cover their song Hair of the Dog on Spaghetti Incident.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
Yeah. Love Hurts is also...
yeah.
I was going to say Love Hurts is also one of the singles from this album, and it's actually the very first time that it was promoted as an A-side single. Before that, Roy Orbison put it out as a B-side, which had a little bit of success in Australia. And originally it was written by a husband and wife country duo called Felice and Boudleaux Bryant for the Everly Brothers. For an album called A Date with the Everly Brothers, but it got caught up in some kind of legal mumbo jumbo, and they weren't allowed to put it out as a single for that album, even though they intended to. So it's had kind of a convoluted history to being a hit.
Yeah. No, but it was a good one.
Yeah. Ooh, Las Vegas was a rejected track from the GP sessions, which kind of says, kind of paints the picture of what Gram was coming into, what kind of material he had coming into the Grievous Angel sessions. But yeah, that's another one of my faves, I would say.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah. What else do I have? I mean, I do love the album as a whole. The closer, In My Hour of Darkness, is maybe my second favorite on the whole one. And it's the only track officially credited as co-written by Emmylou Harris.
Right. Even though she's all throughout the other ones, yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, that one and like $1,000 Wedding also kind of have slightly prophetic lines. Really, like in $1,000 Wedding, he talks about taking friends out drinking, and it's lucky they survived. And one of the repeated lines is there should have been a funeral or supposed to be a funeral. And then let's see if I can remember this off the top of my head, but In My Hour of Darkness has like a sum up that's really good where they say, I hope I don't trigger the thinking music here, but they basically say like he was, deep down in his heart, he was a country boy, and I lost it. But they got me. Yeah, give me a second here. Let me see if I can pull it out of the memory banks. I can't. Oh well, just go listen to the whole album and listen to In My Hour of Darkness. But there's a line on that where they say, he was just a country boy. His simple songs confess, and there were very, and the music that was in him, very few possess. Woo! There we go. I got it.
Nice. There you go.
Got most of it. It's somewhat paraphrased, but there you go. That's my second favorite song on the album, and those are the two that were written during the sessions. So again, like what could have been, what could have come after. We'll never know.
Yeah. I mean, you pulled some bits in, like you said, from GP, and a little bit of a cover on there.
There's like old like international Submarine band songs on there. The second part of the medley Hickory Wind is like a Flying Burrito Brothers song. Yeah.
I think another cool thing coming out of reading about this too is like just learning more and more about like all of the studio musicians and how intertwined they are, and like these aren't guys that sit around and wait 5 years to put out an album. Like they play, they love to play, and they work, and it almost becomes this community where like you said, this guy's crossing over on this album, she's playing on that album, this piano player is going to play here.
Especially here between the 70s and 80s, I'm sure as time goes on, we're going to have more recurring characters who are doing that sort of thing where they're session musicians. Like that was like their golden era for work. Like, there's a documentary about session musicians and people like that. And like, they have stories about like Michael McDonald driving, speeding across LA and Hollywood, trying to get to like 4 different recording sessions in one day. Everybody's working all the time, stuff like that. Like, so I imagine we'll probably start, I imagine we'll probably start recognizing names as we go when we hit from this era.
Yeah. I mean, exactly. You already had a callback on the Gillian Welch album. I mean, from the guitarist, and it's just kind of cool. Like it seems almost a rarity in some circles around this time where it's like, this guy just does the one thing and works on his band only. Yeah. Like, sure. Bowie or Gram Parsons or, the figureheads, sure. But everybody else, they're playing, man. They're keeping busy.
Mm-hmm. Well, we'll let that close out Gram Parsons week. It was a week I really enjoyed. It was an excellent excuse when I normally don't truly have an excuse to sit around listening to country music all day.
Yeah, it's true. But, we'll see what we pull next week. We might be back in the genre again. Who knows?
I had also floated an idea for the podcast where maybe, almost every single week we basically say like, we only get so much time with these. Like, I wish we had more time. Like, I floated the idea of maybe one week cashing in on that and being like, okay, look, you've said every single time, oh, we wish we had more time with this. Like maybe there's one week where we very much do go back and spend a week getting that extra time and reporting back and seeing what happens, right? Like maybe we'll do that someday.
I wouldn't rule it out.
Yeah.
We'll talk to corporate.
Yeah. Get the approval of the suits. But for now, let's see, what have we been listening to this week?
Yeah, okay. I found the first Licorice Comfits album over at Vintage Vinyl, the one on Testament of Youth. Never released here, Japanese import only.
Great.
I'll tape it for you.
No, that's okay, really.
Because you like their second one, you said, Pop Girls, Etc. It's the one with Cheryl Ladd on the cover. Oh, you never saw the cover, though. You just had that tape I made you.
Yeah, I haven't really absorbed that one yet.
Yeah, so this week you didn't make me a tape, or you didn't make me any Licorice Comfits albums, but you did throw my way LCD Sound System, The Sound of Silver, which is an album and kind of a band in general that I didn't have much knowledge of and much exposure to, other than like, maybe I was listening to MGMT, and after the album was done, Spotify threw a song on. But yeah, no, I love this album. I will say I've put it on a lot in the last 2 weeks. Very just fun, simple, doesn't take itself too seriously, but at the same time, very good, like solid music. I think I found myself quoting some of the lyrics now and then, just kind of for a laugh and everything. It's just a fun album. It's nothing like crazy over the top, but everything's just kind of well done.
LCD is sometimes an exercise in how much you can do with a little bit. Like it's not usually grand instrumentation. Like maybe they'll throw like a synth or some like electronica organ sound into it, but it's a band, even though they're often grouped in with kind of electro new disco of the time, which is usually more electronic based, but they're very much this is our disco this is our attempt at like disco krautrock type thing using what we've got, and like they've got that certain sound to it. But I was really glad to hear that one landed, because I feel like it's usually 50-50 on whether people really like LCD Sound System or really hate it. I think it has a lot to do with how you accept frontman James Murphy, who is kind of a goof for a lot of times. Well, kind of a strange combination of I'm sure consciously, but it's kind of a David Byrne-esque combination of, I'm very serious about this music I'm doing, but I'm also kind of a doofus.
The music itself is not serious.
But it's kind of 2000s version of that. So, it can sometimes feel a little dated if you're not into that, but I think the project as a whole kind of, even in the times where that doesn't land for me, like the music does anyway. And like, as it all comes together, I like it.
It was interesting.
I was super excited to hear that.
I have a very, very specific fond memory of the song North American Scum, which is on this album, because it's the song that kicks off the credits to Tie-In Time, Will Ferrell movie Step Brothers, with him and John C. Reilly. So this is a movie my wife and I probably watched together, I don't know, 400 times, 700 times, like just one of our favorite movies to watch. So every time that starts up, it's all the kids that want to make the scene. And, we know the sound. So when I heard that on the album, it's like, shit, that's who that is. Amazing.
That happens.
Okay. Yeah. So
that's what that's from.
It was definitely kind of like I got my safety net. Now let's go for the rest of it.
Yeah. So in exchange, the homework album that I got was Ministry's A Mind is a Terrible Thing to Taste, which I feel like that was kind of a layup. Like, you must have known like that's sometimes we do like the homework assignments and it's a gamble. And you send it over and you're like, I'm not sure what they're going to say about this, but I wonder, you didn't feel like that this time, correct?
I thought you'd like it. I'm interested to hear your takes on it, though, just because it's considered such like a seminal album of like the industrial genre. But, I think there's elements that definitely feel dated to it. And I also think just like Al Jorgensen himself is such a bizarre, funny dude.
There we go again. We have coincidentally sent back and forth 2 albums with frontmen who may or may not grate on somebody.
May or may not, acid trip everybody in certain bands and, shove vegetables up their ass to hit with other people.
And no, to me, this completely landed. There was nothing that turned me off. Not too long ago, I was listening to a lot of KMFDM, which is very closely related. And, through our whole, I think through the whole time, from Musical Awakening to now, industrial has always been something that's been around and something that I really liked. We had a mutual friend who was slightly older than us in the high school days who kind of filtered it out to us, who was, so into it. I believe he ended up studying and then moving to Germany. to become a citizen. He was very into Ministry and Rammstein and industrial in general. And like, between him and the stuff that we listened to, like, that was always something that was kind of, in the air as this is good. And
yes,
what's not to like.
It was always one of those genres for me. Like, I like everything I've heard. I have nothing against any of it. I've just never super dug deep into it to like start finding anything beyond like that. If you know industrial, these 3 or 4 artists. Like I know those artists, like you said, Nine Inch Nails, KMFDM, Ministry. But can I tell you, like, other bands beyond that yet? Not yet. But I like this.
Yeah, definitely something worth exploring. I know that we're starting to trickle down and get bands that are inspired by these bands. Like I want to say, Health, clearly. There's another one called, I want to say 7 Teeth or something like that, who had opened up for Nine Inch Nails on a couple of shows and things like that. Like, but yeah, I think my favorite tracks on this were the first one, Thieves, and also So What.
Yes.
I love those. Those are jams. And also it was this one is another one just like Pretty Hate Machine, where I looked at the release year and I'm like 89. Like this feels, this is one of the things that like feels like it's, defining a 90s sound, but it didn't come out in the 90s. Right. It came out in 89, which is crazy.
It's almost exactly like that. It's the catalyst for that hacker era's, like industrial rock sound.
Yeah. And not to date myself precisely, which I'm about to do, but like to imagine that I'm walking around at 5 years old and like, it's totally possible that one of these tracks could be playing somewhere. Like that's odd. But yeah, I love it. I'd love to know where else to go, and also kind of the relationship of the whole scene of them together.
No, also, like my knowledge of it is that kind of like prior to this, it was much more electronic, even with a little bit of like a dark dance feel to it. But this is the album where they really merged in those thrash metal elements, the heavier chugging guitars.
Yeah.
And it really like,
so besides the homework albums, we were in an extended recording week. So this is one of those times where you end up with a whole lot of what else have you been listening to? So other than LCD Sound System, Sounds of Silver, what else did you get into?
So we spun originally last time Low, the David Bowie album. Yeah. And it was one
we turned our keys on it because we've had a lot of David Bowie recently.
So we will get to that one, and that's one we can certainly pull at any time now, I feel like. But it was an album I hadn't heard a lot of, and it doesn't have a lot of radio singles per se. So I really wanted to give it a chance. And, I'll save most of the opinions for when we get to it, but definitely a profound blank spot, because holy shit, that was a good one.
Yeah. I gave it a spin too. I can totally understand, the way it had previously come up, talking about Noi and Brian Eno and that whole time frame. And like, yeah, I could totally see it fitting in there and like inspiring David Bowie and what he was up to. Yeah.
And then I think, I kind of went a little bit more back to the metal this time around, still kind of dealing with the Brent Hines, fallout. So some Mastodon, and that got me thinking of when I saw Mastodon and Gojira together. So, put on a fair bit of Gojira, and, they're more than just the metal band at the French Olympics for me. They're one of the better bands of the last 20 years, I'd say, as far as metal goes. So yeah, I enjoyed listening to them. And then I guess the last one, just because the music from Gram Parsons kind of got me thinking in that direction, was the Dixie Dregs. They're an instrumental, I guess I'd say country fusion band from the late 70s. Their guitarist, Steve Morse, is pretty renowned for a lot of studio work. He later went on to become like the Deep Purple guitarist for a number of years. And the Dixie Dregs are actually back together. But, they actually have like a fiddle. They actually have Steve Morse shredding on guitar, like nuts, and then they're just all virtuoso instrumentalists. So kind of one of those, all right, if I got to listen to country music, I'm going to at least put on something, that's my country music afterwards. And, I can live with it.
Once you get a fiddle in your band, you've crossed a line, basically.
Yeah,
right? Like,
exactly. You're issued a sample of Chew in the mail.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you got to spit your skull out before you go on stage for that band.
Yeah. What about you?
I'll do a bit of a speed round because there was a lot of stuff. I think even I can't remember if it was even before or after this, but Wilco's Being There is the album I always think back to that kind of kicked off the, do I love steel pedal guitar and like country-ish music? So I went back and listened to some of those. As the research went on, I did listen to, as mentioned, like Flying Burrito Brothers, but also the Byrds album Sweetheart of the Radio, which is on the list, so we'll talk about it again later. The Hives had a new album come out. I want to say either just over or just under a year after that last one. It's called The Hives Forever, Forever the Hives, and it's pretty good. But really the big effect of it had on me was to go back to the death of Randy Fitzsimmons and being like, Jesus, like, yeah, this is way better. And I think I told somebody that I think, there's a lot of bands coming out with like basically band or album versions of like the legacy sequel movies now.
Right.
Like bands are coming back from like hiatuses that have been gigantic and like making new material, like Pulp, making new material, touring again and stuff like that. And of all those albums that have come out, I think The Hives' Death of Randy Fitzsimmons, I think, is the most accomplished one. It's really good.
Yeah, no, that is a damn good album.
There was a couple of remastered albums that popped up that made me re-listen to them. Number one, the This Is Spinal Tap album has a 2025 remaster. That made me
do they have a new movie coming out or something?
They just may. Actually, that also got me to pre-save the soundtrack attached to the new movie, which comes out. The soundtrack at least comes out in 4 days from this recording.
Movie as well.
The other remaster that I got into was a band called Electric Six. I can't remember if I told you about this one or not.
I don't think I'm familiar.
No, they were the early aughts band that was kind of an early viral thing with their song Gay Bar. If you remember that. Start a nuclear war. Hold on.
Can't say I do.
So you get it.
All right.
Okay, if you don't remember or are not familiar with that, I highly, highly recommend checking out this 2025 remaster of that.
Okay. When did the original come out?
Ooh,
you said 2000s?
That's a good question. It must have been, because it was like attached to like a few like. I think the main reason it went big was like it was kind of an early internet thing that somebody had made like an unofficial music video for out of. I want to say it was like a video of those like Quiznos weirdo animals.
Gotcha.
If you remember those.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but even beyond that, there's a whole lot of tracks on that album that are just really good. Like, yeah, kind of. It's almost like what's the band with Justin Hawkins? Blanking here.
Darkness.
Yes, it's very much in the same vein as like the Darkness, where like, we're joking around and rocking, but like secretly we're very seriously rocking.
We're enjoying this too.
Yeah, this is not a low effort affair.
Right.
So yeah, I gave that a lot of listen. Funkadelic also has a 2025 remaster of their self-titled.
Yeah.
You sent me over maybe 2 or 3 Frank Zappa joints that I definitely dipped into and then saved for later listening. Ryan Adams has a 25th anniversary edition of Heartbreaker that had come out.
Listened to that one a ton back in the day. That's a good one.
Tom Petty, did not come up in this album or this episode for no reason. I did listen to a bit of him. And then finally, I will name drop Orville Peck's Pony. If we're going to be talking about alt country, I think that is my favorite alt country dude of the moment for right now.
When you brought up Ryan Adams, that's a really similar one in the Gram Parsons vein.
That's another Gram Parsons walked so somebody could run.
He kind of has his own issues going on.
I'm sure. I'm sure Ryan Adams has opinions on Gram Parsons for sure.
Oh yeah. No, I mean that's definitely when I think of alt country. Like I don't even know how I didn't put that together this week, but it's just like that's Ryan Adams pretty much right there. That folk alt country, but occasionally can rock it out sound.
Bingo. I think we're to the point. I see you holding on to the holy relic of the Indy 500 podcast there.
Time to spin the non-spin magazine?
Yes. Time to spin the wheel. Do you have any special wheel spinning music for me? I think we're going to go with the usual format here where I spin and then you look up in the magazine. Is that correct?
Yeah, you got it.
All right.
And you may find yourself in another part of the world.
Let me be clear.
And you may find yourself, by the way, as many Americans do, behind the wheel
500.
of
I'm not
a large automobile.
100.
But perhaps most importantly, folks, and let me be clear, you may find yourself in a beautiful house.
Obama's finding himself in a beautiful house with a beautiful wife.
You got to ask yourself, how did I get here?
And finally, I am hitting stop. Okie doke. And the number we've landed on is 116. 116. So let's me and you sprint. I want to hear your visceral reaction without a name first before I land on it. What's the non-spoiler? Okay, so we've got a okay. What's the non-spoilery? Do they have? Is the description going to ruin it, or can you read the description in a way that will not completely tip me off?
I can. Float
can you leave out a name? put a bleep or something.
Blank and Blank's response to becoming stars was to make a harder, darker kind of record, and to cover Bacharach and David.
What the fuck? Burt Bacharach covers? Okay, I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to find the name here and see.
2003.
2003?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm almost there. Very interesting. Okay, especially very interesting following this week. Are you and I looking at the same album, The White Stripes Elephant?
We are.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. I did have a long time of being a big fan of the White Stripes. I probably went through a recent period of thinking Jack White is rather annoying. And now I think I've probably settled into a period of Jack White is annoying, but much less annoying than most people. So, whatever.
We could do worse as an elder statement for rock, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think that's where I'm at. And yeah, I don't know.
Not like a direct 1-to-1, but like it's almost a Mayer-esque. You got to hand it to him. He's put in the work. He's proved he's here for the long haul. Like, no reason to hate anymore.
Kind of, yeah. Like despite his music, whatever you think of it or thought of it, I had my takes. When I was 16, 17. Some songs good, some songs just annoying. But the guy's, a music historian. He loves all things. I don't know if you ever get to see the documentary. It might get loud. He's going to
single-handedly keep vinyl alive if it ever dies again.
Right. I mean, the documentary with him and The Edge and Jimmy Page talking guitar. Like, okay, if you can hang in the room and talk with those guys, like, you have my respect. I don't have to like everything you did, but I'll respect it.
Yeah.
So, all right. Little white stripes action.
The White Stripes Elephant. Let's take a little tour. How about you go in the direction of number 1, and I'll go in the direction of the end of the list and see if anything pops out at us as interesting albums. Oh, okay.
We're definitely in interesting territory.
118. We narrowly missed finally hitting a Dexy Midnight Runner. Searching for the Young Soul Rebels, and then right after them at 119 is Pulp's His and Hers,
right, and then 114 Kid A by Radiohead.
Oh shit.
113 If You're Feeling Sinister, Belle and Sebastian.
Oh shit.
Let's see, 112 is Liquid Swords by Jizza.
Goddamn.
I'll go a few more just to talk about.
So we may have landed in. I mean, of all of these, we may have landed in the spot where we were like maybe not preferring it, but like.
Yeah,
I think we're
109, Darkness on the Edge of Town, Bruce Springsteen. 108, Pinkerton, Weezer. 107, Rage Against the Machine, debut.
Yeah, I mean, getting into the 100s, you're hitting. You've got a lot of hits here rather than misses.
There's a lot of things that would top other lists, at this point.
Yeah. 121, we also narrowly missed Aphex Twin's Selected Ambient Works. That would have been really fun.
Yeah. I see some Blur on there.
Yeah, there's Blur, Beastie Boys, the Ramones, self-titled.
Yeah.
Neil Young's On the Beach, which we've talked about before. I think even in that Jillian Welch episode with Rick Quinn, we talked about that one a bit.
Ooh, and number 130. That's a good one.
Yeah, I was just looking at that. Number 130 is Interpol's Turn on the Bright Lights. 131, Michael Jackson Thriller. 132, Dark Side of the Moon.
So while we're on the air here, I'll definitely listen to the Elephant plenty. Are there any other White Stripes albums or works around that?
This one, I think. Let me look this up because I think that's one. I think
is this Seven Nation Army and.
Is that on Elephant?
That's what I'm wondering. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm pretty sure it's, after their like my personal heyday for them.
Fell in love with a girl and that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Oh my God. I looked up the Wikipedia for Elephant and ended up with the animal. Great job. Well, while I'm here, elephants are the largest living land animals. 3 living species are currently recognized: African bush elephant, African forest elephant, and the Asian elephant. But let's get to.
So yeah, the track listing, first track, Seven Nation Army.
Okay,
if you don't know that riff, then you've been living under a fucking rock.
So this is like them emerging into the mainstream, basically.
Yeah.
So besides this, I would say if you're going to explore, go backwards.
Okay.
White Blood Cells is probably the one that you're going to remember that, me and Rick had probably played the shit out of at the time.
Yep.
That's the one that we went to go see them tour on. That's got a lot of, that's got Fell in Love with a Girl, which is, that was like the one.
Dead Leaves in the Dirty Ground. Yep.
And then backwards from there, I think we had talked about Distill or Distigal with, I want to say we talked about that one with Alan Woodhouse or something like that. The further back you go, the more he's very very openly just trying to like do blues.
Mm-hmm.
So that's got like a Blind Willie cover on it, a Sun House cover, stuff like that. So yeah, if you need to go backwards, I'd say 2 albums and check those out as well.
Okay. Yeah, it'll be a good refresher for sure. I mean, even in our cover band, we played some White Stripes,
yes.
Hardly.
Which was my fault, I'm sure.
Well, I mean, we all could have turned our key, so to speak, but we didn't. We enjoyed it.
Yeah, there you go. All right. Cool. Well, that's our assignment. That'll be very interesting, and like I said, a good time for Jack White to come back into our lives and not be relentlessly shit talked. Maybe just a little, right?
Well, appreciate him. Yeah. Exactly.
And we had also gone through that kind of era of people arguing over whether Meg White, should be considered a great drummer or not. And now I think we're past that as well. I think most people would agree now that actually, and to his credit, it's a lot of Jack selling and reminding people that she is like, she may be like 60% of what makes the old White Stripe stuff, seem good. He's just
totally,
he's a good guitarist but he's just doing his blues thing on, a little more high gain. Whereas she is, kind of holding it down and not being so flashy as to cover that up. It's a
sum of the parts operation.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And we're going to get to talk to about it next week. So got anything to play us out on?
I do. I just
got any final notes or?
Yeah, no, I'd like to pay respects to our dying sense of humor and puns. We made it a little over 3 hours without making any General Grievous Angel puns.
Oh, I did mean to note that my general notes for Grievous Angel are titled General Grievous Notes.
There you go. Exactly.
Yes, again, congrats to us. That's two very obvious, Star Wars prequels puns that we didn't hammer into the ground at the time when we very much could have.
Totally. Honestly, I think this week I just kind of want to run back, since we're probably not going to get to do a lot of country. I want to run back this little song by I think he says his name is Alice Bowie.
Play us out, Mr. Whoever this is. This next one's a song we haven't played in a while. It's a song about a podcast.
I'm going to pause it for a second and suggest that maybe this artist's name could be Orville Peckenbacher.
This next one's a song we haven't played in a while. It's a song about a podcast and the audience who loves it. All right, let's go. I don't want to be your weekend lover, but maybe I could be a flying burrito brother. It's a podcast. You'll love it. It's the Indy 500. All right, well, signing off for Helio, Breddy, and special guest Al Michaels. That was the week that was. Gram Parsons, 317. See you later.